So welcome, Stanley.
Thank you, my governor. I happen to come from Nyeri County, so I'm addressing my governor. Thank you very much for inviting me to say a few things before the session begins. As it was mentioned, my name is Stanley Bagathi. I'm an advisor to the Joint Agriculture Secretariat, which works for JASCOM. I've been there for some time. And the genesis of this mechanism, we worked very closely with the many people I'm seeing in this room. Then the CS was a governor. He was the chair of the governor, the COG. We worked with Governor Nyoro. He was an advisor to both the chair of the Council of Governors and the CS Bet, who was then the minister in the Ministry of Agriculture. It was very hot in those days. This issue of intergovernmental issues were hot, and we discussed long nights. I remember from the COG, we had Robert Kiteme with his team there. They were putting their foot on the ground. We had Akina Phillies, they're all here. I can see Dr. Akunga there. A lot of them are here who really spent many days discussing and coming to an agreement that we need a mechanism that brings the two levels of government together and that discusses issues and comes up with the joint resolutions. So this is 8 years ago, almost. And we, at one time, we agreed it would be every 2 years. And so we haven't missed. I saw that the CS was worried that we have missed. We are actually early because we are now doing the 8th one, and this is the 8th year, so we are not actually late. So we have, during the last presentations this morning, we realized that the presentation I was going to make and the presentation that was going to be made, if you look at your programs, the presentation that was going to be made by the Joint Agriculture Secretariat on the resolutions of the 3rd Intergovernmental Forum were handled very well by Governor Nyoro and the CS Munya. There's no need to repeat. Also, the presentation I was going to make was handled by the two, and also the chair of the acting chair of the IGRTC. Especially the acting chair of the IGRTC put forward the things which I really wanted to put on the ground, because I am still not very happy with how far we have gone, and he put things down which we really need to still capture and still work on. And so also my presentation will fall out, but at least I'll present 3 slides before we allow FAO to assist us with a presentation on the status of food systems or the status of the agriculture sector in the country. And it's a presentation that we worked on jointly, so it will be presented by the institution which has that technical capacity, the FAO. And I'll present to you just 3 slides, just to pour a little bit of water on the very beautiful things which have been said today about how much we have achieved in those years. So maybe if I can step down here. Yeah. So this slide was handled more or less by the IGRTC. They mentioned the genesis of it, so I'll not dwell on it. We can move to the next. This also, well, maybe I might just as well mention that the mechanism is there to effect efficiency, economies of scale, efficiency and effectiveness and improved governance in the sector. And that comes out of the 2 levels of government working somehow in parallel, but looking somehow in different directions. The national government looking up and out of the country, exports and such things, relations, intergovernmental, international relations, regional relations, and the counties looking down, looking at the people, but all working together in harmony. The institutions that are formed must be legal. So I asked myself, do the current sector intergovernmental institutions fulfill that criteria? Let's have the next slide. this is the mechanism that we've been discussing today. Unfortunately, I don't have a pointer, but we can see how it is. It looks like we have the Intergovernmental Forum. That's where we are today. And you can see on one side we have the Council of Governors with the chair of the Council of Governors, who was today represented by several governors and also the chair of the Council of Governors Agriculture Committee, Governor Nyoro of Kiambu County. So if we were to follow this line, we have the Council of Governors chair, we have the chair of Agriculture Committee, we have the CEC caucus. The chair is here, I believe. You can put your hand up, Albert. Albert is the chair of he was also very much involved in the design of this thing. So was Agatha Thu, who is also in the house. The CEC caucus. And the CEC caucus, of course, is in charge. As a CEC, he brings the CECs together, and each CEC is responsible for their staff in their counties. So that is the government, very simplified, the side of the governors, of the Council of Governors. Then we have, on this other side, we have the ministry. We have the Ministerial Executive Committee, which is composed of this MEC. You may not have heard about it many times, but it exists in terms of it's a Ministerial Executive Committee made up of PSs, the CS, PSs, and the CAS. And in the ministry, we have quite a number of PSs. And this team makes up the Executive Committee. It has a secretariat, which is called the ATO, which works with the departments. And this ATO is also the main driver, or if you want, the driver for the ASTGS, which you know, the strategy, and also links the MEC to the intersectoral coordination. It links up to the others who are outside the ministry. As we said, the ministry has the role also of looking upwards and outwards, when the county is looking downwards and on the ground. ATO works together with the departments who have national programs, and they have a national program coordinating unit called APCO. That's the ministry. And as you can see, we haven't put any extension staff on the ground. But we've been told that there seems to be some extension staff of the ministry on the ground. But I guess those are people who are part of the programs. And they are supposed to meet, and even there is a joint forum where they are brought together by IGRTC to discuss their own sectoral issues. Agriculture sector is leading. I am sure you would agree with me, Purugu, that the agriculture sector was lead in forming such a mechanism. Others are trying to copy that, and even IGRTC has tried to come up with a regulation, or if you want, for assisting sectors to come up with such a mechanism. So we have the JASCOM, which brings together the two levels at the highest level. And also, I would say, up to this level, it brings them together. And those are entities. We talked about sector working groups. We don't want to go along into that. Those are the groups, that technical groups, 4 of them that work for the JASCOM, and it has a secretariat. Now, the part why I really wanted to show this slide, it's because of what I have put a circle around here. The JASCOM has supported counties to come up with a similar mechanism in their own counties. They are coming up with county agriculture sector steering committees. County agriculture sector steering committees. These committees are supposed to coordinate the sector in their counties. It's a very important mechanism because it's bringing together all the agricultural sector stakeholders in the county under one roof, in a committee of about 15 people, in which they discuss what are the issues in that county. This way, they can make decisions which can then be taken up the system, and therefore each county is putting forward what are the real issues. And right now, in the counties, I am sorry to say what we have experienced, there has been a lot of confusion in the sector, especially when you have national programs which are doing what they want. They are not, sometimes not taking, donor-driven directly, not even taking care to be coordinated by the ministry, but doing out their own thing. So there is need for this CASCOM. The donors will also be part of that committee, so that whatever they are doing in that county is known to the governor, is known to the CEC. The CEC of the main agricultural value chain in that country, in that county, is the chair of that CASCOM, and the development partners working in that county will also be members of that CASCOM. So will be any research institution and such who are critical in that county, and also private sector representation and civil society representation. So that 15 is quite concentrated. It can be a bit more or less, but I haven't seen any less. It's much more than, it's more than 15 mostly, but we recommended 15. And they are the ones to lead the coordination in the county. Now, I must say, all counties have formed and launched their CASCOMs. All the 47 counties. Nairobi County was the last one. I think he launched it in December or something like that. Where's the jazz? When did they launch? I think it was launched in December or November, could be November. But it was the last one. But all 47 counties have formed and launched their CASCOMs. And it means we are ready to go. The coordination in the counties will improve. For sure, it will improve. The ASDSP program has carried out a capacity building, training needs assessment, and the training of trainers for training those committees on how, what their roles are, has been done, and we expect now the training will start soon and the CASCOMs will function properly. This will be a major milestone when counties will be able to work in harmony also across the counties with similar mechanisms. Now there's another one here. Below that, each county of course has several sub-counties, and just to make sure we really get this, yeah. We also have the sub-CASCOMs. Some counties have already formed some sub-CASCOMs, like Trans Nzoia, I think, Kisumu, I think if I'm not wrong, some counties have already formed that. And why I put this line, that's where I began. Why I put this line is because I wanted to make it clear to this forum that one of the conditions we had up there is that all the mechanisms that we put up in this setup should be legal. They need to be legalized. And we are saying now that CASCOMs and sub-CASCOMs should be legalized. Some counties have already undertaken activities towards achieving that. If we have all these institutions, if we have these institutions as legal entities, then we can talk about we are having a mechanism which will last and which will not be kicked out by the next government or next dispensation, like it has happened before in agriculture. For those who have been there long enough, you know we had coordination structures which were chucked out, so because they were not legal. If they make this legal, now JASCOM has already been legalized. It has a legal notice which was published on I think 21st November last year. So this is what I wanted to show you and just appeal to you to make sure in your counties, this is more to the counties, make sure you legalize your mechanisms of coordination there. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, just one quick one. The private sector umbrella organizations now have become part of this mechanism. The private sector has formed this organization called ASNET. We had a presentation this morning, Agriculture Sector Network, and we are looking at how this ASNET will collaborate with this whole mechanism. So let's see the next slide. So this is where I wanted to pour water on your happiness. Yeah. Yes, Panasias. Oh, let me give you a clean one.
Even though we are not in the plenary, there are issues raised on the structure. The structure of, they are missing actors who are critical, the development partners. Yes. To where level do they come in? And then there is also the economic blocks, because counties in regions need also to coordinate their interventions. Yes. They don't have to come to wait for, because the national is okay, yes. But there are cross-cutting, unique issues in regions that must also be coordinated, discussed, and agreed. Some of the issues we were discussing of vaccinations, AI, whatnot, markets, where do they come in?
Yes. Thank you very much for that one. Yeah, I mentioned in the CASCOMs that each development partner who is in a county should be part of the CASCOM so that they feed into the CASCOM. In the JASCOM, they already are, CS, they are there but not as full members. The development partners, the chair of the development partner, ARD, is what we call a what? Co-opted member. Ex-officio member. So the troika of the development partners is an ex-officio member of JASCOM. It can be reviewed, and it could be decided whether they want to become full members, but that would have its own limitations because they are changing quite a lot annually, and we want continuity. So, but we have Moses here. He may want to say something about that later. So, yeah. The co-chair, yeah, please.
Yeah, I think we have discussed that, and we've had sentiments from development partners.
Yes.
And they were very excited that we managed to gazette JASCOM. But they expressed that reservation, a wish that they want to be members of JASCOM. Now, we should look at the purpose and the functions of JASCOM.
Yes.
Because it is doing the coordination, it is better that you have self-coordination, meaning all the people to be coordinated are represented within JASCOM. If we want ASNET, a member of ASNET to be a member in JASCOM, let it be. So that once a decision is arrived at JASCOM, then it can trickle down to CASCOM and sub-CASCOM and whatever, and it can go up the randa to the levels that we are. So let's be objective. We can ask the legal implication of that. We say these are the additional stakeholders that would want to be included. Can they come in through amendment of the Gazette notice?
The author of the Gazette notice is sitting next to you, so this could be easily done, I guess. And if it's a resolution from this meeting, I think I don't see why it cannot happen. So when I CS, it allows for it. It allows for it. And also it allows for the private sector to be more involved. We may want to look at the whole design a little bit. How do we make them such that they are members, but also they respect this line, which is very critical and central. The last slide again, so that I leave the stage.
Just before you do that, okay. If we go in that kind of direction, we are going to leave that point hanging, and it will be. I think we should we should make a resolution. As one of the resolutions. Fortunately, the CS has a legal mind, and he knows whether it allows. Because it's pointless for us to continue keeping development.
It's up. Maybe I just wait for a second for it to come up. Is it coming up there? The slide. But I wanted to impress the people with the slide. Yeah, so move to the next slide so that I can impress the people by pouring water on their happiness. It is about resources. And we always say resources follow function. That is agreed on. Resources follow function. Now, the Constitution established that 85% of the functions in the agriculture sector are at the counties. 85% of the functions. So if resources follow function, what are we saying? We are saying ideally 85% of the resources in the agriculture sector should be in the counties. Do you think that's realistic? Is that the case? So think about that. The next thing is that decisions on use of resources should be made where the action is. This, I'm quoting one Dr. Kiome, who is also in the house. He used to repeat that very often when he was in the ministry, the PS in the ministry, and heading ASCU, which was the coordination unit then, and we worked for him. And he used to say decisions on use of resources should be made where the action is, and he actually devolved the resources of the ministry to the districts. Believe it or not, the ministry was already devolved in terms of resources. The program called, who knows the program in the house? You know? Not now. The predecessor to ASDSP2, we had a program which already all the budget was going down to the sub-districts. The divisions will get their money directly and then they need to account, and he had a system for accountability. So resources can also go down to the counties. And Dr. Kime is here if you want to ask him how he can inform you. So is that the case at the moment? I don't think so. In conclusion, I could say that the achievements of the constitutional imperative of a fully devolved agriculture sector is still work in progress that we are working on, and I wish us luck. Thank you very much.
You should also have added that it needs to be accelerated. Because that speed at which we are moving, we might see the next millennium before we are fully where we want to be. So thank you very much. I want to also welcome CS and my chair. We had already started, and I have my panelists with me. I have Mr. Moses Abukari, who presented in the morning. On my left, immediate left, I have Dr. Yulita from the Deputy Governor, Her Excellency, Dr. Yulita, the Deputy Governor Nandi. And then I have Ms. Mase Muganga to my right, who is a farmer from Mombasa County. We are still expecting Kutima or Rasanga, and they will join us. But right now that we have listened to Stanley, who promised to make a very short, and I don't know whether it's a meaning short that has changed meaning, short presentation, I now have the pleasure to invite Ann Chele to come and present on behalf of FAO, kindly. Anchele will be handling agriculture sector performance in the devolved system of governance. What's missing? A microphone. Oh, okay. Very well. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. CS, all protocols observed. Before I make the presentation on behalf of the team that put all this together, I would like to invite my boss and the FAO representative to Kenya just to say a word. Madam Ambassador Kala Mokavi.
Thank you very much. Really, CS, Excellency Governors, GAS, PS, and all protocol observed. Mine is really just to introduce myself. This is the first time I'm participating in this important forum that really addresses agriculture, which is the main mandate of FAO. So I really came personally because I could not really afford to miss it. we as, of course, our chair has articulated, the chair of RD has well articulated the views and the position of its member, being also FAO one of them. So we really stand behind it. What I wanted really to add is to first really to thank for the support that FAO and the development partners, I should say, have been really receiving from the Ministry of Agriculture, the CAS, the PSs, the COG. I've been already 1 year here, and I've had opportunity really to travel and engage with many of you, governors and CSs, and really coordination is a critical issue because it's how we can really support better, and this forum is important in articulating that. Of course, CS and the governor have articulated really well the issues, one of them being really climate change, which is one of the challenges that we are facing. And as FAO, we are working on our new CPF, which is the country, of course, program framework. The last one is ending this year. So we are really looking to better articulate the issues of resilience building, which is critical, the issues of anticipatory action, because we know that, of course, the impact of climate change, which is negatively affecting agriculture, and that needs that capacity development that we have to build within communities at the national and country level are really critical. And we aim to work together as we consult on those issues, many of them that you have mentioned, to really develop a CPF that will really address and contribute to transform agriculture, and of course to bring us together to attain the Vision 2030 and the Big Four agenda. So let me stop here and really appreciate and welcome this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So quickly, we are going to run through some slides that are just going to, the purpose actually is to provide some points that will stimulate discussion, and hopefully also, challenge this forum to interrogate some of these issues a little bit more, so that even as we propose and formulate the resolutions or the recommendations, then we are addressing real issues that are still there in the sector. We've seen a lot has been done since devolution, but there are still quite a lot of challenges. So quickly, of course, we already know that agriculture is the backbone of our economy. We know that it is supposed to drive economic growth targets that are in the Vision 2030. Even in the Big Four agenda, if you look at two of the pillars there, agriculture is key in the realization of the manufacturing pillar through provision of raw materials, as well as the realization of the 100% food and nutrition security. So very important. Then, of course, we know the dynamics and the landscape changed in 2010 with the promulgation of the Constitution. So basically what the slides we are going to go through are doing is to kind of look at, so what has happened since then? Are we doing better in terms of productivity, in terms of food security status? What has happened since devolution took place? So next slide, please. So this is trying to compare productivity of various staple food crops. I hope you can see we have 4 graphs here. One of them is showing dry beans, then maize, rice, paddy, wheat, which are really the staple crops for the country. If you look at the trend of these graphs, and remember we are talking about the new constitution somewhere here. So basically you realize that the productivity has not changed much. 10 years later, I think 10 years now or 11, since the devolution took effect, you see that for some of the commodities, the trend has remained stagnant. Really, there is no change. It is not increasing. Look at the beans. Maize is almost flat. Then wheat, again. If you look at rice, at the end there is some peak, probably because of the interventions that were mentioned this morning that are targeted to the rice value chain. So basically the productivity has been stagnating and even declining in recent years if you look at the statistics. So this is really for this forum to ask questions. Why is it that devolution has not helped to improve these trends? Why has the trend continued, the productivity continued stagnating? What is it that is not happening or that needs to happen so that the transformation that we need to see here actually happens or takes place? Next. Then we look at the livestock value chain as well, and here we are using fresh milk as a proxy just to look at the productivity of the livestock subsector. Again, you can see a bit of peaks and drops, but basically you can see again even the peaks are not as high as we would expect. Again, there may be a question of data, because I remember when we were working on this slide, some questions came up, dairy seems to be doing so well. Why is it that it is looking like it is just stagnated? So again, we also need to question sometimes the quality of the data that is available. But you can see still that the transformation, the dramatic change that we expected to come out of the devolution does not seem to be happening. Next. Then again, we are comparing here the trend in food imports and exports. If you look at the imports curve, which is the green one, you can see it is rising. Some of the rices are quite big. That is probably those of the years where we need to import large quantities of food. But look at the exports. The exports are actually beginning to have a downward trend, which is showing a situation where the country is slowly becoming an import-dependent country. We are beginning to import more and more food commodities and exporting less. So again, questions there for this forum. What is happening? Why do we keep importing? If you look at the import bill, it is quite large. And when you compare that with what the government is investing in the sector, then you see really the import bill is taking a huge percentage of the investment in the sector. Next. Then we also looked at the food security situation in terms of the number of food insecure people. Starting from 2014, the data we had available, up to 2020. Just look, if you drew a line at the top of these graphs, you can see a definite curve that is going up. What does that mean? The country is becoming more food insecure. Every year, the number of food insecure people is increasing. So again, there are questions, there are issues that we need this forum to interrogate and come up with solutions to address this situation. Next. Then in terms of continental commitments, particularly under the CADEP Malabo Declaration, you know Kenya is a signatory of the Malabo. Previously it was Maputo, then we recommitted in Malabo to allocate 10% of the total budget of agriculture of the total budget to agriculture. And I think this has been discussed since morning. The allocation of budget to agriculture is still very low at the national level and also at the county level. A few counties are doing well, but majority of them are at 2%, 3%. National level, currently I think, or the average is about 4.9. It drops even sometimes to 3, 2, so we are not doing well here. Of course, this is always a point that arouses a lot of debate and discussion in terms of how do you determine, how do you delineate, this 10%. For example, the Ministry of Finance will argue that they actually allocate more than 10, because they look at what they're allocating to infrastructure, to water. But I think it is reasonable to say that the budget allocation to agriculture is below 10%. And then, of course, if the country is to achieve this 10%, the counties are key. We've just been told that budgets have to be allocated where the action is. So if the country has to achieve the 10%, it must first of all happen at the county level. So counties are so key in ensuring that we are actually attaining these continental commitments. And you can see the graph of the budgetary allocations. It's basically going down. And as it goes down, the growth also, of course, is affected negatively. So the role of counties in realizing the continental commitments, and it, not just the budgetary allocation. There are others under the CADEP commitment, like post-harvest loss, for example, which the country has committed to reduce, and the figures are there, but we are not there. So what is happening and what needs to be done? Next. So on the issue of CADEP, we also thought we needed to highlight some of the gaps because this is so key. And of course, we are aware that the country is implementing the CADEP through the ASGTS. So we thought we needed to highlight, and they have been highlighted before since morning, the issue of weak M&E and the linkage between the county and the national level in terms of the M&E framework. And the lack of data, which is directly linked to a weak M&E. Because if the M&E system is not there, is not operating, then how do you get the data? And so that also affects your decision making, because we are making decisions that are not informed by the available evidence. So really, these are points that need to be discussed, and we come out with clear and practical recommendations. And it's good to note that now the ministry is working on the M&E framework, is quite advanced. And I really think we need to agree how we take it to the next level, even to the level of establishing the National Integrated Monitoring and Evaluation System and linking to the NIMES at the national level. Next. Then we just wanted to highlight also the nutrition status, highlighting the numbers under the malnutrition trends. And we only want to look at stunting in this case, because stunting is what you can address through food-based or agriculture-based interventions. And This is one area where some improvements have been realized, but the figures are still high. But the other thing we wanted to highlight here is also the fact that you can see the importance of agriculture even in contributing to the health of the population. So the need to prioritize nutrition sensitive, integrate nutrition sensitive interventions into policy and planning so that we can continue improving the numbers there. Very important. Next. Then trade. I think this morning there was some discussion about trade across the counties and the cesses that are charged by the counties that are not harmonized and so on and so forth. I think I won't dwell on this one, but I think and I remember Governor Nyoro saying that they are already addressing the issue of harmonization of the cess, so we can continue. Next. Then international trade, again, what we noted here is, number one, the high cost of production makes our commodities uncompetitive internationally. Then our international trade is dominated by 2 or 3 commodities. That is coffee, tea, horticulture. So it is narrow in terms of the mix of commodities, and it is also narrow in terms of the destinations, because we export like to 2 or 3 major destinations, and if something happens in those markets, then our export trade collapses. So the need to diversify in terms of mix of commodities and also in terms of expanding the markets. Next. Yeah, so I think we've already talked about this. The high cost of production makes them our exports uncompetitive. The infrastructure, of course, rural infrastructure, and of course there is a lot of investment in infrastructure, but this needs to go to penetrate deeper to the rural areas where the farming activities are taking place, so that farmers are able to take out their produce to the markets. Then there is the issue of limited financing to finance these transactions or activities up front. And yeah, again, the role of diversification and poor, low shares of trade. I think we've already touched on all these issues. Next. Yeah, so I think we are done. I remember there was a slide on mechanization where we were trying to emphasize the need, even as we talk about, the role of the youth. The youth are not interested in working in farming or working in agriculture because of the drudgery involved, the low productivity and so on. And we were looking at the returns. The increase in returns when you use mechanization is quite significant. So that is also something that probably needs to be interrogated. So those are the ones we were able to highlight. They are not exhaustive, but we thought that these are key and urgent, and they need to be discussed, to be interrogated, and probably pragmatic solutions found. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Anne. Let's give her a better clap. Okay, let us give her a ladies' clap. Very good. Thank you very much. So we have appreciated your presentation on the sector performance, and all of us agree that it paints a very, very stark picture, very bleak picture about where we are. And while we may not regret where we are, we must take very decisive steps towards improving on the same. Before I invite my panelists, I captured a number of things. Number one, why hasn't devolution improved agriculture? That is one of the issues we should be asking ourselves. Where have we gone wrong? What can we do? And as we talk about agriculture, let us also ask ourselves another key question that has come. Are we getting raw data? Is it data that we can trust? Is it reliable? What can we do about that? Looking on, we find that there is one other thing I've noted, that we are almost becoming like Congo, who import everything they eat. Why is this one happening? The pictures, the charts have shown us that we keep increasing the amounts of imports to this country year after year. What is happening? What can we do? Okay, on the issue of the Malabo Declaration, counties are the culprits as much as the national government is. But then, with the chair here, he remembers that we did take a very decisive action for health. And we say that all counties must, regardless, during the UHC era, that we must ensure that our budgets strike 30%. Almost all counties are there. Why are we not moving our allocations from whatever we are to 10% as proposed? And as signatories to the declaration, why are we not moving? Of course, I have observed other issues on high cost of production and everything else. As we engage the panelists, I also want you to prepare for the plenary, which we are going to have immediately. We are through with this, and therefore I would want to have a microphone here. Kindly, let's have the microphone so that Ms. Mase Muganga is ready. I know Daktari is also ready on my end, and Moses is here. And since they say ladies first, I will also add a clincher, but after gentlemen. Let us ask Moses to begin for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. By the way, I come from Ghana, so in Ghana they say that ladies first, but men in front. So, but this is not to say that we are taking control of the situation, which is at hand, because it's very critical. And thank you very much, Anne, for that presentation, and Joe Stanley. It paints a picture for us that it doesn't mean that we cannot change things. There are a lot of things that we are already doing, and structurally we need to enforce or accelerate, like to pick up the chair's issue. One is on productivity. So the question has remained: productivity prior to devolution was stagnating for maize and beans, and during devolution until now we're still in between. So in a nutshell, nothing has changed much in terms of the productivity of maize and then beans. And here, I've been in Kenya for some time. I've gone some of the counties in the field and interacted with the field. And I have a background in agriculture. So one of the things that I found that struck me most in the western region is that maize takes a longer time to be in the soil. For me, I found it very puzzling that you have maize that stays like a cassava in the soil, and the effect is that it's mined the nutrient. And here you come again that it still stays, it dries, and of course it doesn't dry, it rains, and then you increase the risk of aflatoxin. And then there's little gap for the soil to heal before you plant again. So the risk is that we are in a situation where we still want to increase productivity, so we put a lot of fertilizer. And then for economics, they say that we reach a state where we call the marginal rate of return. So there's no additional benefit on whatever you add to it because the soil itself is not healed. So for me, one of the big questions, I think, is both looking at the production and the consumer side, because Kenyan, of course, ugali is our staple food. And we love githeri and the rest. So everybody, the population is increasing every time. Everybody wants to eat ugali. So if there's no ugali, which is linked to more, the nutrition situation Anne mentioned, is that means that we haven't eaten. So we don't have food, but the population is increasing. And if you look at the causality is that since the productivity is to remain flat, more population need to eat. So our per capita consumption for maize and beans that we had data in the late 70s, that's what we are using for projection and planning. So effectively, we are we are negative planning from the start. So in reality, what we are doing is that we are not increasing and projecting and planning properly. And that's where it's also linked to the fact that we have occasionally food shortages that we have to import maize even from somewhere. So for me, that would be one key in terms of the production side to change, and also consumer behavior to change from that side. So we have the technology. There are maize that are shorter duration that can adapt to the different agroecological zones, and we have to make sure that we promote adoption and wider adoption of this technology, modern technology, or improved variety of maize. So for me, that would be one area that we have to look at in terms of how do we change the production system. And here, when we also look at maize, we should also look at maize not in terms of human consumption, but we also look at animal, we also look at industry. And how do we also satisfy the demand for industry and also for the animal consumption. And then I think that those are areas where we look at it from, and then we can be able to effectively plan and look forward to, in terms of how we see what we can do or not. And of course, I know some input, we talk about the increasing cost of input, fertilizer, for instance, but I think there are better ways of improving and then improving the production, and this is something that we continue to work and support in moving forward. Then we talk about data. I think this, we cannot belittle this area. So the question is that data integrity for who and how. I think sometimes it's also the question, what is the incentive for getting the data? But here we can look at it that not providing the data is also look at the cost of not providing quality data, because that's why we are here. Because we'll come back to the same issue because we don't have evidence-based planning processes, the data. So we spend a lot of the money, the resources that we have on trying to understand and clean up the data, which means effectively divert the resources, the limited resources that we have in terms of making sure we improve on the data. Here, Waziri mentioned in the beginnings that even some climate change issues. And here, over the past decade, I think our knowledge and technology of trying to understand climate change was limited. But now we have advanced tools, we have modeling, that even now, the question is now we can even model, and in the next 30 years, what will be the production system in Kenya? Will maize still be profitable? In our internal model that we've used, climate tool, we realize that by 2030 onwards, maize will not be profitable or productive in the Western Kenya. We have to move to different. So it means that what do we need to change now? And there are different crops in terms of diversification that we can introduce that are helpful for us. So we also need to enhance our design and modeling and planning, and we have tools available. That's why the development partners we bring on the table that we can also help the government in terms of improving your decision that in the next 20 or 30 years, what will be our production? Would this be profitable? Would this help for the environment or climate change? Then what can we adopt to make sure that we effectively plan our production system? The last but not the least to mention is about trade. And I like, Anne, your presentation, and something that triggered my mind is that a report by the African Agricultural Trade Monitor indicated the whole of Africa, despite the African Free Continental Trade Agreement being available, there are two indices that they use. They call the Trade Complementarity Index and the Trade Intensity Index. So the Trade Complementarity Index is that what are we exporting that Uganda, our neighbor, is importing? Why can't we trade and enhance? So instead of importing or exporting to faraway countries, why can't we boost inter-African trade? And here I want to also bring it down closer, which triggered money. Across the economic blocks, what are we trading? What from different economic blocks that we have competitive advantage that we need to enhance and form agreement that, so I don't produce maize, you produce and bring it and absorb it. so that we redistribute the food within our own country, and then we move forward to exporting outside. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to just highlight this, and I'm going to open up debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moses, for your insight. We'll now ask Ms. Massey kindly to, I hope you're also taking notes so that when we get there, you will be able to respond and raise issues and your concerns and your opinions too, kindly.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Massey. I work for the Beach Management Unity, also a farmer in Mombasa County representing communities. And kindly, you allowed me speak my language in Swahili. If you cannot understand, ask your friend to translate, because I'm good in Swahili. In Mombasa, we don't speak English, so that please kindly understand me. So today, I'm going to speak about local community on what we do. Katika Mombasa County, tunafanya kazi ya uvuvi na ukulima pamoja na ufugaji, na katika kazi ambayo nafanya mimi ni mwenyekiti wa vikundi. Tunasaidia kina mama, wazee na vijana sana sana, na ningependa kuzungumzia maswali ambayo yamekuwa yakizungumzwa tangu asubuhi, tukitaka kujua ni kwa nini agriculture haiendelei. Na ningependa kuzungumzia jambo moja ya kwamba katika Kenya yetu, kwa sababu tuko hapa tusiri Mombasa peke yake, ni kwamba wavuvi ama wakulima wa shambani tumekuwa tukiingilia kazi ya ukulima bila elimu. Na katika Kenya yetu tumeambiwa kuna TVETs, lakini hizi TVETs ambazo zilizoko hapa Kenya sijaona wakisema wametenga mipangilio ya kusema hapa tumeweka nafasi ya kwamba tutakuwa tunafundisha wakulima wetu. Zamani kulikuwa na Foki Club, ikaja ikapotea. Sasa wakulima wa sasa wanalima bila ufahamu. Na tukiangalia pia kazi ya uvuvi, manake tunaangalia upana kwa blue economy ambayo tunaiangalia kwa hivi sasa. Kwa mambo mengi katika uvuvi, wavuvi wengi wanapewa vifaa vya kufanyia kazi bila kuelimishwa, na pia hawana skills za kwenda pale. Tumepewa Bandari Maritime College, lakini ukiangalia mwenye anayekwenda Bandari Maritime College anatakikana awe ni msomi na pia awe akona pesa. Kwa sababu school fees ya Bandari Maritime Academy kusomea only Coxswain grade 3 inataka over 150,000, which means mkulima kama mimi, mkulima wa kawaida, sitakuwa na uwezo wa kufanya ama kusomesha mtoto wangu. Na tukiangalia hizi TVETs, watu wanapewa nafasi na serikali, wanapewa grants, wanasomeshwa kwa pesa ndogo ndogo. Kwa hivyo katika ukulima hawajapewa nafasi za kusoma. Then ukiangalia mkulima huyu wakulima mboga, wakulima viazi, wakulima nini, wengi wao hawana cooperative. Cooperative ambayo atasema nitakwenda pale nichukue loan nijiendeleze katika mradi wangu. Kwa hivyo kupata mbegu ya kulima hana. Kupata vifaa vya kufanya kazi inakuwa ni ngumu. Tukiingilia pia upande wetu wa fisheries, ndio serikali imefanya bidii sana, tumepewa maboats, tumepewa vifaa vya kufanyia kazi uvuvi. Lakini je, huyu mvuvi anapopewa ile boat anaweza fanya nayo kazi? Hawezi. Na ni vitu vingi ambavyo tumepewa na serikali tufanyie kazi, lakini kwa sababu hatuna ujuzi wa kuvitumia, tukipewa boat tunaziweka juu ya mawe, zinangojea upepo upige tu. Hatuendelei kwa sababu hatujapewa elimu ya uvuvi biashara. Tunafanya kazi tu kwa sababu tumeambiwa tuende tukafanye. So tukiangalia mara nyingi kumekuwa pia na challenge, unasikia wavuvi wanatoka Pemba ndio wanakuja kuvua kwetu. Wavuvi wa Kenya hawavui. Kwa sababu unakuta kitambo, mimi nikiwa mdogo nilikuwa najua KWS camp ilikuwa imeweka kitengo cha kusomesha wavuvi wanapokuwa elimu za uvuvi pale KWS Naivasha. Lakini sijui ilipotelea wapi, haikusomeshwa tena. So unakuta ukienda Tanzania kuko na hizi elimu ndogo ndogo, watu wanafundishwa uvuvi ili wajiendeleze, na ndo nakuta certificate nyingi za uvuvi zinakuwa recognized kutoka kule Tanzania. So sisi tunataka kujua kwamba serikali ya sasa tunapokuwa tunafanya kazi na tujapewa ujuzi wa kufanyia kazi, huwa ni ngumu. Unakuta certificate ambazo tunazopewa labda ni za fisheries, tumepewa leadership ya BMU. Ndio, I'm the leader, mimi ni kiongozi wa BMU. Lakini kama sijasomeshwa leadership skills ama entrepreneurship skills, wale community ambao niko nao nitawawezesha namna gani? Inatakikana ya kwamba hata kama tumejua ya kwamba kuna beach management unit, viongozi wamechaguliwa pale kusimamia zile rasilimali kwa sababu tuna manage zile resources pamoja, ama kama ni agriculture farmers wanataka ku manage zile resources pamoja. Nimesikia PS wetu akisema ya kwamba viazi vimekuwa vimeleta juice story. Lakini wale wakulima wangekuwa wamewezeshwa na kupewa pembejeo za maana, wale wakulima hivi sasa chakula kingekuwa kiko. Mombasa County tunafanya urban farming. Ndio ile urban farming tunaifanya ni kwa sababu tumesikia mwingine amefanya, lakini tunatakana pia tupewe skills za kufanya ile urban farming ili ya kwamba tupate kuchangia economy ya Kenya na pia chakula kipate kuongezeka katika hii sekta yetu ya agriculture, na tupate kujua kwamba hawa watoto ambao na hawa vijana na kina mama ambao tunataka kuwaweka katika hizi kazi za kujiajiri, watajiajiri namna gani kama tujapatia skills. Ndio maana tumeona kama ASDSP ilikuja na ikaanza kutusaidia, kutuelimisha, kutushika mikono ili wavuvi nao katika ujiendelezaji wajiendeleze. Kina mama ambao wanataka kulima walime, lakini ukulima wetu bado hatujakuwa na msingi. Kwa hivyo siku ya leo, kwa sababu tumekutana hapa na tunataka kubadilisha maisha yetu, tunataka kuhakikisha chakula kimepatikana kwenye meza. Tunaambiwa kuna climate change, imetajwa sana climate change, lakini hii climate change si kwetu peke yake, hata kuna kwingine pia kuna hiyo shida. Lakini je, sisi ambao tunajiita agriculture sector tutafanya namna gani ili chakula kipatikane na watu wapate kujiendeleza? Kwa hivyo siku ya leo mimi nikiwa kama kiongozi najikuta uongozi wangu uko, lakini bado sijaweza kuongoza mtu mwenye ambaye hana msimamo, kwa sababu mpaka mimi nikiwa sijapata mtu amekuwa na uwezo, hata ukamwambia maneno 100 na hujamwezesha, hujampa nguvu ya kufanya ile kazi, utakuwa umefanya kazi bure. Asante.
Asante sana. Tumpigie makofi mazuri. Tunakushukuru Mase Mganga, umezungumzia hasa uvuvi na ukulima na pengo zilizoko na tumezielewa. Ni kweli kuna pengo la kwanza ni ukosefu wa fedha, pia inaonekana tajriba haziko, ufundi hatuna, lakini kwa yote tutayazungumzia na kuona je, tuwastahili kufanya nini ndio tuweze kuendelea. Sasa tuna daktari hapa, Daktari Yulita, karibu. Yeye anaweza ongea na kikwao.
Our CS, Chief Guest, Chair of the Council of Governors, all protocols observed, good afternoon. He's asking me to speak in my language, but I'm sure 3/4 of the people in this room will not understand. And so that I don't have to translate, allow me to use the language that all of us can be comfortable with. Unfortunately, we may lock Mercy out, but I get it that she understands. It's just that she's more comfortable speaking Swahili. Initially, I was not part of this session, or rather this panel team, but allow me to just highlight what county governments have been able to focus on as priority areas under devolution. Our main focus as county governments has been to focus on household food security for vulnerable households. And we know largely because, as we've been told, 85% of the agriculture functions happen in counties. This has been one of our focus for most counties actually, because one, as our sister here shared, the data as far back on matters to do with food security and malnutrition among our population, you realize that in most counties, quite a number of us have our malnutrition levels above the national average, and Nandi is not spared. Initially when we came into office and we were given the data from 2014, we did not believe it. We were in denial, but it also, we were challenged to take up and become more proactive. We started sensitizing our communities on the matter of combination of food commodities to just be able to avert or to reverse the stunted growth that we were experiencing. And we're happy to report that in the data that was released in 2020, there's great improvement. Now, another area where counties have emphasized or focused on is supporting priority value chains so as to be competitive. And also, as county governments, we have tried to provide sort of incentives to provide diversification of crops for purposes of improving household income. We've also tried to build up on our primary cooperatives to enhance their leadership capacity and to try and rally the primary cooperatives into unions, out of which then they've been able to work together and to lobby for better pricing for some of their products. In particular in Nandi County, before we came in, our milk farmers used to sell their milk as low as 20 shillings, 21 shillings. But as we speak right now, they are able to sell their milk at 42 shillings. Out of that aspect of congregating and allowing the farmers to come together, not only as individual primary cooperatives, but now coming up as union. Another area where counties have focused on is on digitization of essential services and other support services like the e-voucher and the subsidized AI services. And when the question of why has devolution not assisted agriculture, I'm not so sure whether that is a true position, because there's a lot that has happened since devolution that has actually enhanced our interaction between our Department of Agriculture and our farmers. So really, we may not have increased the number of workforce in that sector, but we have become innovative and we are now doing digitization. We are able to communicate with our farmers through our apps, through our platforms. And then also right now, for us in Nandi County, our AI services are accessed through our call center. We have a toll-free call center where if a farmer recognizes that their cow is on heat, they will call that number and the nearest AI service provider or our animal attendants who are on the county payroll actually are connected to the farmer and they get that service immediately. There's also been focus on sustainable land management and climate change resilience and adaptation. And I believe that in a way it is helping us to heal our land. Areas that we had probably started experiencing a lot of depletion. We may not have experienced the output or the outcome of these interventions, but along the way we'll be able to realize that this in itself is going to bring us to better production, better use of the land. However, we cannot say too much because there have been challenges with devolution, as some of them have already been highlighted by some of the earlier speakers, considering regulations and legislations that are still a hindrance to implementation of the county policies in the sector. And also some of the functions have been clawed back. Even though we are in a new dispensation, some of the functions are still being implemented by national government. And the other major issue that we still experience is that some of the functions and programs that are donor funded are still being coordinated at national level. And yet the activities really happen in the counties. So that coordination aspect still needs to be worked on, and I'm happy that it's one of the discussions in this conference that we are looking at how to enhance that coordination and to close the gaps. I'm happy to be part of this discussion, and I think one of the things that we need to also be thinking through is, apart from the cost of production in agriculture going up, what are we doing to also support farmers to access markets? We've had seasons when we have a lot of glut, products go to waste, we have losses because we do not have an alternative market for our farmers who have experienced a huge harvest. Or, for example, if it's milk, you have a lot of milk and you end up not being able to process because we don't have the capacity. And I think one of the things I want to point out is that some of our counties have already stepped in to actually provide a platform or an opportunity for value addition. I'm aware in Murang'a we have a milk processing plant. We're doing the same in Nandi County. Ours is about 85% complete. And we know that in a way this is going to help our farmers, one, to ensure that their milk can be processed locally and probably fetch better prices. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daktari. We have heard Daktari and the team from my end. I now want to open the floor. I don't know who is going to coordinate the microphones. I can see Dr. Romano is already up, and when he speaks, and then Inyoro speaks, the rest of us keep quiet. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Governor. And yeah, by way of introduction, my name is Romano Kiome. And I am here because we are supporting this Intergovernmental Forum by supporting the Council of Governors through a program that is financed by USAID called Accelerated Institutional Food System Development Project, which I manage. And when you manage a program within USAID, you are called a chief of party. I wanted to put that straight. That's why I'm here. But I'm also here in my own capacity as somebody who has been in this sector for so many years. I won't quote the numbers because there's quite many young people here. But those who have been around know we have been around. And sometimes when I listen to the whole of today, and it's good to be where you've been. I've been within government in nearly for 30 years, maybe 3 years. And now I'm being able to listen being outside. As you heard the governor saying that we have been in the sector long enough, and we have what we call institutional memory and quite a bit of experience, both nationally and internationally. But listening to what was being presented today morning, sometimes you feel a bit of sentiments, and you feel like you've been shooting a moving target. Moving target in the sense that you haven't seen that much change. I must mention I'm working on a book. I'm actually working on a chapter that you're being contributed in Kibaki's book on the performance of agriculture sector. And I've already written that chapter. Therefore, you'll be able to see that chapter probably by April. So that is the 10 years of the Kibaki government, of which I was permanent secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, and also director of the Kenya Agricultural Research Institute. But then listening to today and listening to all the presentation, and also looking back, having been in the sector long enough, you feel a bit like we've been shooting a moving target, and I hope such kind of forums can be able to slow down the target better so that we can shoot it. Because this target of food insecurity, this target of poverty, this target of, especially the big four target of 100% food security, I was arguing with those people who developed it. We know it's not achievable, 100%. It's not been achieved anywhere in the world anyway. including America itself. But it's going to have a very ambitious target of 100% food security. You can achieve probably 100% zero hunger, but you can't achieve 100% food security. But it's a good target to him. So anyway, listening, I feel like you've been shooting a target. Therefore, maybe I want to suggest a few things to do things slightly differently. And you might ask why I have not done it before myself, but that question you can answer thereafter. I think what I hear coming out very strongly is that you need to slow down or to be able to know what will be done. It is important to have very critical or very well thought performance indicators of this sector. Because we have had the issue of data, the issue of other things, the performance indicators of this sector are not probably been agreed on and are not very well thought. And therefore, having a few performance indicators is very important. I would suggest some of them in a short while. Usually we use what we call population-based indicators, which can aggregate many other smaller indicators, but I will also suggest how to go about it. But one point which has come up now and then is resource allocation. We've been talking about this from the time, immemorial, we normally say until the cows come home. We know that the resource allocation in any sector are very important for that sector to perform. We know those countries that have met Malabo Declaration, the differences they have made. Ethiopia, we know. Rwanda, we've been there, we know what's happened. Tanzania is almost gotten there. Angola almost also got there. I think Nigeria was coming close, but it fell back. So we have to take some of these targets seriously, and I know the CS is here and has been crying for what to do about it. We've been crying about this all the time in the past, but it's really a political will. And the only probably, I don't know how we'll be able to put it, is actually to mobilize farmers to say to the ones who are aspiring for the next elections, if you don't, you should promise to meet that target. I think I'm trying to say that we should see how we should get into some of these manifestos of work on, because it is a political will. The countries that have done it, it's been a political will. Rwanda is not very different from Tanzania, is not different from Ethiopia. I have been involved in doing strategies for those countries, and some of the strategies they have done are very similar to the ones we have done, but resource allocation is very important. That target we have to track and make it seriously at the political level. The second target, to look at that target, as an indicator of the performance of this sector is resource allocation by the counties. As you have heard, some of you mentioned, when we were in the system and some of the people who are presenting here, we are kind of modeled the devolution in the sense that I wasn't accounting for anything. Once I receive the budget, I allocate to the counties, to districts those days, or to the provinces, and the provinces account for it, including development money and things like that. Because I didn't want the Obesiners or I to sign all these checks, sign papers, sign whatnot, devolve where action is. We know also those countries that have done well, like Scandinavian countries, we know Europe. I was telling somebody very high the other day that many of the ministries which the sector, agriculture sector doesn't performs very well, don't actually, what they have is the Ministry of Environment and Agricultural Development. They don't necessarily even have to highlight that agriculture, because you want the actions need to be taken at the grassroots. I can elaborate that more. But again, what I'm saying is, and I want also to differ with the Council of Governors and the statement they are making, that they want also to bring in the Malabo Declaration and the cascade to the county level with the same figure. That's not correct. Because the calculation of the resource allocation of the county level should be based on the contribution of the sector to the GDP of those counties. I would expect that a sector that's highly dependent on agriculture, probably almost 100%, or whose economy is 100% agriculture, should allocate probably even 60, 70% of its operational budget there. Therefore, we can help to calculate and cascade, and the CAG could now look out at whether you are really meeting those targets, those commitments. I'm saying this because, as you know, even with the program I'm implementing now, I go around the country, I know some countries have done very well from where we left. Some others have done worse, as most of those officers will tell you because I worked with them. Frankly speaking, there are some counties I go where I find even the vehicles that we left, even the tractors that we left, they cannot afford fuel. Even in some of the vehicles, some of the resources we allocated, some of the governors took them and went to do other things with those resources. Others have actually added them. They have bought many more tractors. They have expanded. They have even recruited more staff. I was amazed. I went to Taita Tabeta the other day. They recruited an additional 54 new staff. Yeah. I went to we were in the Reggae Marakwet. We talked to them. They recruited an additional 14, not Reggae Marakwet actually, it was Omabe, an additional 14 vets. So you can see the counties are doing it differently. And therefore the COG and the national system to be able to be taking those counties to account for those indicators that have been developed here. So I suggest one of the biggest indicators that should be looked into is the resource allocation at the national level and at the county level. At the county level, I would like it to be calculated based on gross domestic product contribution of those, of agricultural sector, those counties, and not an average for all the counties. The second parameter I would like us to use, and we have to continue to use this, to really measure the performance of the agriculture sector in food and nutrition security. That we can't avoid, because it's already in ASDGS. We are saying that we want to achieve 100%, but can we be measuring that parameter and be reporting on a regular basis? And taking into account, and we like to do it at county level, not at national level only. Because if we do at national level and county level, it will not make much sense. We have to know which counties are falling back, which ones are improving, because the performance is different. There's two other parameters I want to introduce that I think will make the business to be done differently. One of them is what we call value added, and the economists will tell you how it is an aggregate of quite many parameters. If you track value added parameter, value addition parameter, as an indicator of performance of the agriculture sector, you may be able to capture a lot of the things that we have been talking about that we have not been able to make a much difference. The second I would like to suggest, the new one is private sector investment. We've been talking about private sector, and they say they can do this, they can do that. We all know that when the private sector investment increases, really the performance of the sector increases, because the private sector looks for profit. Therefore, it is an indicator of good performance of the sector. And we would like to work with them to see, can we put in parameters to measure public sector investment, both at the national and county level, so that we can see that we are doing business differently. Another parameter I suggest could be measured and do things differently is market system development. Market system development and trade. You have to find a way of measuring that parameter, because again, that is the one will show how we are moving the sector from business as usual, from subsistence to leader farming as a business. So those two parameters, value added, private sector investment, and marketing as a business, would be able to move the sector to the next level of doing business differently. These are suggestions. You can look at them. You'll have the technical people to look at them, but you are willing to support on how to parameterize these parameters. Finally, I think there is what we call, I would call short-term actions, low-hanging fruits, things that you can do quickly and probably make a difference. One of them is that these institutions of coordination really need to be put in place, because we have the Constitution, we have the Intergovernmental Act, and those have already established the form. The form of agriculture sector, there isn't much you can do about it. It is in the Constitution, it is in the Intergovernmental Act. We really don't want to change those things. Again, they take time. So we have the form. If we have the form, we want to make sure that the form follows function, so we know that the form is there, the functions need to follow. Then, functions follow form and resources follow form. Now, there's a few things we need to do to put these institutions in place. One of them is, I think these structures, although the Cabinet Secretary has taken the trouble together with the Chair of the Council of Governors and Agriculture Committee to have these institutions gazetted. Gazetting is not enough. I've told you before, I've been in government, there are so many gazette notices that are lying which have not been implemented, even the ones from the President. Usually the gazette notices don't say whether you implement them or not. It is the will of the political person who is there to do them or not. But the most important is that these matters are at least captured in an act of parliament. I know it may take time for that to be done, but we have to aim for that to be done for this to be legal personas. And you know that the reason for things to be captured in an act of parliament is so that these things are participatory, they become constitutionalized because an act of parliament is a constitutional document, and therefore you'll be able they will be able to last before the people. Of course, you know, even some of the acts of parliament are not implemented, but at least that's the farthest you can go. The second thing I have found is that there is a serious problem with the data. I think we have to get away of this forum agreeing or at least making some move on data. And the only way you can move on data is first you develop the indicators. Once you agree on the indicators, you have to agree on the method of correction, the method of analysis, and the method of storage. It's not an easy process, but at least in some of the key indicators that you agree on, you have to agree on baseline. Because unless you know where you are starting from, you'll not be able to go. So to me, that's one of the low-hanging and priority points. So I started amendment of the Intergovernmental Act to institutionalize the organization we are talking about. Baseline data for the indicators that you agree on, that should be a priority and can be done quite quickly. That will probably lead to a monitoring and evaluation system that is rational. I understand some stuff has been done on it, but it can be rationalized. There's one other matter I have added. I didn't hear much of it, but from my experience, I know that state corporations, other agencies become a kind of a constraint, or they suck the resources from the center from doing the real job. I think you need to look at a sector after the revolution, because most of the state corporations we have, most of the agencies we have were done before the revolution. After the revolution, the state agencies that we have responsible with the agricultural sector, how rational are they? It's a quick rationalization that can be done, because I think that may not have been done after the new constitution. The third point, probably the last and the most important point I wanted to bring up is that listening to the cabinet secretary and listening to the chair of the Council of Governors, and they know when it is good, I say it's good. When it's bad, I say it is bad. The truth of it, I believe, and I feel comfortable that they actually know what needs to be done, but it is not being done. If you take, for example, the challenges that the cabinet secretary gave, they are very practical and very rational. If you take the issues that the chair of the Council of Governors is mentioning, they are very practical and they are very natural. But why are they not being done? Probably one of the things that this intergovernmental committee, a forum can come with is to capture those, prioritize them, and actionalize them. Say this is priority should be done by when and by who. This is priority should be done by when, by who. Because lamenting is one matter and getting done is another matter. We'll come back to another conference like this and we will still lament, and then I will still be feeling very frustrated that we are shooting the same moving target, and the years I've been in this sector will be increasing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Romano. CEO, I don't know whether do we still have another session today? Hello? Do we still have another session today?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We are going to request you to chair it, please.
No, I won't. It's afternoon. I just want to know how, any other responses from the floor, so I know how many, so that we don't end up speaking until tonight. Yeah, so the chair, you and him, and there is a lady there. Oh, there is somebody else. So we'll start with you, then, and kindly, the experts have talked. When Romano speaks, don't belabor. Just pick on those points like I have, so that you also don't. So kindly. Maybe you could also mention the name, and so that they pick it up.
My name is Lawrence Mhaka. I'm Chief Administrative Secretary, Minister of Agriculture. But before I joined the ministry, I used to work in Kakamega County. And actually, there's goodwill at the county level in terms of what people are putting in. For instance, in Kakamega, what Governor Oparanya did was one thing, he bought fertilizer, but you see the county bought fertilizer and was selling at half price, subsidized price, seeds, and were selling at subsidized prices, and bought tractors, which were plowing at half the market price. But this did not work. It didn't work because the drivers who were given the tractors were stealing milk, were stealing the fuel, and when you buy new tires, they sell the tires to other people and put old tires so that within 2 weeks they are gone. And the fertilizer that he bought at half price, there are cartels who are buying that fertilizer at in bulk, and then they sell to neighboring counties and up to Uganda. So they think they not work. So what we are saying, instead of buying as counties directly, we rather partner with the private sector so that we support them, and then they buy. We shall be developing our own people, and then farmers will be able to get there at a lower cost. Now we also came in with something else called one cow initiative, where they went to the poor people from the villages and were given one cow, dairy animals, and also 1 day old chicks. Each farmer was getting 100. These ones were being given for free, and they spent a good amount of money. Unfortunately, whatever that was given to the male, the cow, were used to pay dowry, and the chicks, they could not be able to afford to feed, because feeding 100 poultry, layers, you will find that you are spending over 50 kilograms per day, which will cost you close to 3,000. So you give to the poor who cannot even feed themselves, so they won't feed. Now, so we advised him, because I was in planning, we advised that through monitoring and evaluation, we realized that we are not, despite the fact that we are spending a lot of money in this, we are not making any progress. The yield, milk yield was not increasing. The production, maize production and beans production was not increasing. So we advised that they form cooperatives. Now, currently they have formed cooperatives where you put farmers together, and now they have what we call microfinance, where farmers are now given as cooperatives, and now they are able to control, so that you can't go to the cooperative, get the cow and pay dowry with the same. So that's one of the things that I'm suggesting, that if we form microfinance and then we put people in cooperatives, we can be able to give them loans at low cost, and it can support. Now, then there's a fish stocks. I visited, recently I visited Busia, Siaya and Homa Bay, and fishermen are going into the lake and coming. You can either go for a week and you don't get anything. So there's a problem again. I think we should make our policies strong, so that we have some breathing space where we can give our lake some breathing space for like 3 or 4 months. We say maybe from October to December, we leave fish to breed, and then we do the fishing later. Thank you very much.
Somebody else was here, then we'll go to the gracious lady, and then we have somebody there, and then the chair. My chair will, the CS Utafunga Basi chair will mention something.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is John Macharia, and I'm the country program manager for Agra in Kenya. And first of all is to provide greetings from my president, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, who wanted to be here, but was not able to be here because of other duties. The second thing to say is that I wanted to echo quite a lot about what Dr. Romano Kiome said. And I want to focus on the issue of data. I think what is not measured really doesn't get done. And one of the commitments of the last Intergovernmental Forum, I think the last presentation, if I'm not wrong, was actually about a commitment to develop a monitoring and evaluation framework for the entire sector, not for the ministry or for the county. It was a monitoring and evaluation sector, a monitoring and evaluation plan for the sector. I think I would like to ask Honorable CS and our very able Governor Nyoro, what would be the commitment out of this forum in terms of how we actually develop a sector M&E framework, and we get away from saying the county is doing this, the ministry is doing this, and we get back to saying as a country, what are we doing as regards agriculture? And as we speak today here, one of the things I've not heard out of from the last forum and now is how many farmers have we actually impacted? How many male, how many female farmers have we impacted over the last 5 years, or from the last Intergovernmental Forum into this one? How much fertilizer has actually been provided in the way of subsidy, etc., etc., etc.? How many fingerlings have been provided out there? And I think we will move to the next level the moment we start taking stock in terms of outputs and outcomes, even of the little funds that have been provided to us. I think we focus a lot on the CADAP 10%. But if we have been provided with 2%, are we able to show what that 2% is doing? How far is that 2% taking us, and how far do we need the other 8% or 7% to take us? The second point I wanted to talk to actually is something that my friend Angela said, and it has to do with the statistics that she provided here. I think one of the other commitments we've been trying to push for is the development of a food balance sheet that constantly tells us about the amount of food, staple produce, that is actually available for consumption, that is safe to eat, that is of good quality, that is affordable. And it does not necessarily need to be maize. It needs to be green grams. It needs to be, you know, is it fish stock? Is it milk powder or whatever? And I think, again, I would like to know from our core chairs how we would get to a situation where we have, whether it is county-based food balance sheet, a national-based food balance sheet, as well as a regional-based food balance sheet. Because the reality of Kenya, especially when we talk about ugali, we are a net importer of maize. And slowly by slowly, the chair, the CS was saying, we are a little bit trying to even go to potatoes. But we can only begin to stall these approaches to the extent that we start counting from the micro level, from the meso level, and from the national level, and then set up appropriate actions to be able to forestall the direction in which Angela was saying that this country tends to be going as regards food security. Thank you very much, Governor.
Very much. We have the gracious lady behind there. Then we'll have a gentleman at that corner before we come to the front here. Kindly.
Thank you, Chair. Allow me to speak briefly on my experience. I have been a CEC before I talk about the private sector. I worked as CEC in the first government, and Dr. Romano Kieme just mentioned it, but I would like to mention something about allocations in the agriculture sector. I think from my own experience, a majority and a very big proportion of resources are actually filtering into the mode of extension service delivery at the county level. I personally worked with a budget of about 250 million shillings in a county, and more than 200 million of that budget was actually going to salaries payments. So I think there is need to revisit what our CS mentioned about a committee that has been tasked to look at extension survey delivery and the costing and come up with options, because much as we allocate resources in the agriculture sector and we continue employing public extension service providers, I'm not saying it is wrong. I think we need a mix and probably look at what is most cost effective, because public extension service provision has been proved very expensive. Dr. Romano Kenmo was asking where I was working our CEC in Nyandarua County between 2013 and 2017. And I think there is need for us to do that. The other thing that is very important is coming up with effective agricultural programs. I think some of the works we are doing in the county is not quite sustainable. For example, if we support subsidies, how long can we do this? And I think there is need for us to really rethink and plan together. And my suggestion is that if just we have started something very good, and I'm very happy that CASCOM is within the counties, and I think there is need for private sector, for development partners, and for public, for the county governments. I think there is really need for all of us to sit together and think through the challenges in individual counties and support the counties to prioritize what is going to quickly transform the agriculture within the counties. That is my proposal, and like I have mentioned, in our ASNET strategic plan, one of the things that we want to do is institutionalize private sector role within the counties, and this we are going to do, this we are committed to do, so that we can work together within the counties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Let's give a clap. Someone who had lifted up their hand on this end, kindly.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Geoffrey Omlai. I'm the CC member for Agriculture in Kakamega County. Now, last time we had a meeting here at Mombasa Continental, there were some colleagues who had asked how come that in Kakamega sometimes we are giving a budget for farm inputs up to, say, 570 million. And I thought I could just try to share the light on that, that sometimes, once you know the uptake of the farm inputs in the county and you decide what to buy, the price is already now fixed. It's no longer 50-50. It is 60 paid by the farmers and 40 paid by the county as subsidy. So what that means is that at the time of planning, you now capture that as part of your revenue, because that's what you'll also use to pay the suppliers. So once they pay now that through the bank, it's just taken as a revenue, then it's taken to the CRF at the central bank, and it will be part of now the revenue that will come as you pay the suppliers. I thought I could share that.
Thank you very, very much. Now we come to my chair. A microphone here. We have one here. Thank you.
I want to thank the presenters for a job well done. And I want to continue to emphasize, and Dr. Kiome has covered quite a number of areas. I want to continue to emphasize the aspect that my feeling is that we are still describing the part of the elephant that we are touching. Some say it is a ear, others say it's a tusk, but we have not gotten to a point of describing the whole elephant. Let me start by saying that some of these data, good or bad, the analysis can be very depressing and misleading, because it masks the great work that is going on and the great projects and programs that are going on, though unfortunately they still remain pilots. But I can tell you across counties and across the whole country, there are some very, very, very extremely well-performing programs and pilots. And I personally have been involved in one pilot, which within a period since 2018 up to 2020, over 500,000 farmers have adopted new varieties of maize, from a variety that matures in 6 months, 614, to a variety that matures in 100 and 110 days, and doubling or tripling the yields. And that has been transformational. Today, There are places that you can go in Kiambu, and farmers will tell you the variety they know and the variety they grow. It may be a very, very small pilot because 500,000 farmers in Kiambu in a population of 2.7 is insignificant. But the question is, you don't see it in the data. I'm sure there are quite a number of other innovations and pilots that have taken place, including the extension service. Again, the reason for that increase in productivity has come in through us trying an extension service where farmers become their own extension agents, what we call the village-based advisors. So what I'm trying to say is that, and it's the same, if you look at dairy, there are places where milk production has more than tripled per cow per day. So we have several of those, but they are in a pilot stage. And they cannot become Cs. They can only remain IRADs of success. And those are some of the issues, because you don't see it in the data, because what the data does is that it pulls out a tall guy and compares that with a short guy, then it gives you a medium-sized guy. So that medium-sized guy which is being presented, you don't know that there was a very tall guy and a very short guy. So the most important thing for us is, and again it comes to the data issue, is to look at the tall guy and say, how did he become tall, and who are these short people who are bringing us down? We used to look at the average maize yields in Kenya, and we realized that when you put the maize yields in Kitui with the maize yields in Uasin Gishu or Trans Nzoia, then you get an average of 6 bags per acre. If you remove Kitui and say Kitui you do cotton or you do whatever, the yields become 10. Just by removing that guy who was very short, who was bringing the tall guy down. So it is an aspect of data and how you handle data. And I always know that sometimes you start with the answer and you develop the question. I've been in policy analysis for quite some time. But having said that, and we need to think very seriously, and we need to document, and we say that as Council of Governors, we need to document all of those successes, all the areas of successes, all the pilots that has been working, and we ask ourselves, what can we do in order to scale them? Can we also develop a running platform where those who want to come and run, why we have done this in Kiambu, and quite a number of you has visited us. In fact, DG Nande was with us. PS and others have been with us. Can we be able to, run and start to implement it? But having said that, and that is an important thing for us, having said that, I think as a country, and those people who are inside this room, you should be very depressed. In fact, you should have a sleepless night tonight. If you have a good night today, then you are not a Kenyan. This is very depressing. What is it telling us? That your imports are going up. What was not superimposed there is the population growth. If the population growth was superimposed in the productivity curve, you would have seen the divergence. And that is the divergence I was calling the gap between production and consumption. It's very depressing, because what you are saying is that you are not only going to import more. Today we say the import may be 400 million. It's going to become 5 or 6 and 7. But you're also saying the source of that money or that resources to import is also coming down. Because our exports, which we have been very proud about, our comparative advantage in exports have been eroded. Specifically because there are those countries who are scavenging on us, who are looking at us and saying we have to defeat Kenya, whether it is in flowers, whether it is in vegetables. We had all these issues of pesticide residues and so on and so forth. We have not diversified. We have not maintained our comparative advantage. We still export our tea in 4 main markets that are very volatile. And so what I'm saying is that is a very depressing picture. Now, you cannot allocate 2.3% and expect maize productivity to go up, unless by miracle. So our actions are shown by the figures we are talking about, bad as they may be. We are also, and I know I have been involved as a Kenyan in discussions about Kenya with people who did not know that I'm Kenyan. And they say, what has been the problem with Kenya, particularly in my stay at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Seattle. You know, people would come and say, what is the problem with Kenya compared to Ethiopia? And if they could analyze our market economy, and our debacle and our biggest problem is our parastatus. When we went into the market economy, we allowed our parastatus to become parasitic. Instead of helping farmers, they started taking from farmers. And the CS talked about the cooperatives. How can a cooperative like Komodai have a loan of 200 million? Okay? So, we have not been able to transform and rationalize the parastatus. And because of what the CS said, this aspect of protecting our territory, okay, if you are in national government, you don't want, sometimes I was one-time advisor to the CS, not this one, and I could hear people say we are ceding too much grounds to counties. And then the counties want the national government to cede everything to them, including cafes and other areas. So you can see the fight. So in summary, what I'm saying is there are things that we should do tomorrow. We have to make sure that we stop taxing agriculture and agriculture implements so that farmers can continue to add value to their milk. We have to continue to remove all the taxes that are in agriculture that were not there when Dr. Kiome was PS. Some of the taxes were not there, but now I think we've been so much crazy with raising revenue that we are hurting the geese that raise the golden egg. So there are things that we have to agree that must be done. You know, governance in cooperatives and all of that. They have to be done in the short run. We have to agree as counties that we have to allocate more money in agriculture, and particularly now in the new government. Now you can do very little. If you allocate money now in January in agriculture, you will not be re-elected in 8th of August. The maize will not have been harvested. But what we are saying is that we are doing the budget now. We are doing the budget now for 2022-2023. And we have to hold governors accountable. In fact, for those who probably not be re-elected, put 15 and 20% so that the guy who comes has no choice than implement or do a supplementary budget. So my colleague governors, I think they are not here. I'll tell them because
by those who will not be elected, you mean second term?
Second term. I mean second term.
Yeah,
I'm not saying.
You know, it's very dangerous.
To say that statement. I'm saying second term. Second term governors. So make it very, very difficult. Put it 20%. Thank you for collecting for the. So there are things that we can do in the short run. But let me tell you, we have an opportunity because we are expecting a transition. It doesn't matter which direction in 2022. And the point at which I keep on talking, I keep on describing the elephant, is where we have to look at the agriculture sector in this country and say it is sick and it is dying, and the only thing we can do is either put it at the ICU and then treat it, overhaul it, and then we'll have a sector in the next 2-3 years as we do the next intergovernmental. We have to say that, but I'm saying there are things that we can agree to do in the short run, which are important. All of things, the challenges that CS was talking about on AI and all that, we can agree. But until we sit as a country and have a sleepless night on the data that is being presented, we are heading in the wrong direction. And our children will ask us. We are already being asked. I worked for 17 years in Tegemeo, producing this kind of data. Now I see the same data that Anne is producing. I get very depressed. So I think that is one of the things. We keep our eyes on the ball, that we definitely need to transform this sector from what it is today. Thank you.
My chair, I want, just before you give the microphone, on the Malabo declaration, your colleague, Dr. Romano, gave a passing statement, which I picked, and he said, it's okay to implement 10%. It is okay. That is Malabo. I don't know whether it's your feeling that 10% would be okay for national government, but then counties, according to him, should commit money according to the GDP contribution of agriculture to that counties. You get my point. I want to give an example. If you look at, and allow me for using Wajir just as that, and then you look at Kiambu in terms of agriculture, do you think it is wisdom for Kiambu to give, to allocate 10% or commit 10%, while Wajir commits 10%, or according to Dr. Romano, Kiambu needs to commit 70%, while Wajir may commit 10 or less, because their focus is not, the key driver is not really agriculture. Maybe your thoughts on that?
I agree entirely. Actually, Malabo declaration was misleading, because you could argue the same about Mali and Kenya, and Senegal and Chad. You could argue the same, but Malabo came up with that. It was based on a flat rate, and I agree entirely that the importance of agriculture, and that's what we keep on saying. If you say that agriculture contributes 23% of your GDP, and you are allocating it 4.9%, honestly, where does the other percent come from? Okay? Although we are saying, and again, this is something that has been made very clear by CADAP, on what exactly goes to agriculture. So you cannot tell us that road infrastructure is agriculture or whatever. But I agree with you, and I agree with Dr. Kiome. My only reservation with that is that those countries are also in the process of developing agriculture and making agriculture contributes more to GDP. So if you look at Kajiado, for instance, what has been happening in Kajiado is that pastoralism has been reducing and arable farming has been increasing. So if you use the current figures of production of maize in Oitoktok only, without realizing that in another 2-3 years, there will be more agricultural production in Kajiado, then using it on the current contribution of GDP may be misleading. So you need also to look at your potential and incorporate a factor for your potential.
Thank you very much. Now CS. Just before the CS speaks, Dr. Yulita.
Before the CS speaks, allow me to appreciate the contribution from all the speakers. But one of the things that has not come through in all the conversations we've listened to this since morning is that we haven't focused on agriculture that is not rain-fed. So that we have regions in this country that have potential, but because they have low rainfall, agriculture has not been their focus. Does it mean that they cannot be productive? What is happening in other countries that do not have as much rainfall, yet they are able to feed their population and even export? Look at Israel, for example. We even get some of their products here in Kenya, and we have more rainfall than Israel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is food for thought. CS Munya. And by the way, I never got the opportunity to say this, that you have been very vibrant. It is good that we say, even if we have made baby steps, it is because of you. Thank you. Carry on.
Good point. Thank you, Governor. My co-chair has taken words out of my mouth. I was actually going to focus on that issue that the data is too summarized to give you the complete picture. Because if you combine horticulture that has been doing very well and growing, the tea sector growing, actually even the sugar sector growing, people don't even know that. The drivers, the key drivers of growth in the last year is tea, horticulture, and sugar. Sugarcane production went up, and dairy. Now, if you combine them with those that are going down, you get an average. You don't get there. Because you are combining the laggards, some that have even been abandoned for whatever reasons, with the big boys. So when we analyze data, we really have to also get those nuances for us to be able to know really what we need to do. And then sometimes you also don't look at growth in terms of volumes. Sometimes you don't look at the quality, because sometimes, like coffee, some value chains may not show volumes growing, but the quality and the productivity and whatever else may come. So we got to isolate all those factors for us to see it. But the point that really I wanted captured, and I'm not saying those are not important, but I'm saying it's being left out, is we ignore the incomes that farmers make. Yet they are the main drivers of growth. There is no farmer who is stupid to continue investing and getting nothing. So we ignore that. We say, oh, we've not invested. We could invest and produce, but it's other people who earn the money. So you continue saying, why am I making this investment and it's not changing anything? Because you have ignored the primary stakeholder. So you are throwing money at the wrong, you are addressing the symptoms. You are not addressing the problems. And this is what we have seen with coffee. You address the issue of earning for the farmer. We may not have grown in terms of the volumes exported, but the value of the volumes and the earnings of the farmers have gone up. You will see next year, even productivity will go up because farmers also invest. It's not just the government investing 10%. It is also the investor who is the farmer also investing, and he has to be incentivized to invest. That's what we have seen, especially with the smallholder farmer, the largely in the tea sector, in the coffee sector, even in the other sector, dealing with the challenges and the governance issues we are talking about in cooperatives. Even the sugar sector is also dealing with earnings for the farmers. If you address that, then you already contributed to the production in that sector without even putting any money. And just addressing and dealing with the parasitic relationships that are along the value chain. I'm sorry to say that. Somebody who doesn't like that issue of parasitism, but it is there. It is there. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much, CS. As I thank my panelists, and time is up, I just want to mention that I really want to appreciate Dr. Her Excellency Dr. Yulita Mitei, Madam Mase. Thank you very much, and also the Ghanaian. I thought he would talk about cocoa. And I know he's still smarting from the latest AFCON match they played, but we wish him well. Malabo Declaration is key in our discussions today. I have captured modernization of agriculture as one key issue. Data integrity and its availability is also very, very key. We must also improve on our markets, and according to Moses, let's stop looking very far. We could even trade with Uganda, and not even that. We could even trade across economic blocks. Let's start focusing on that. Let us also according to Mercy, build the capacity of our farmers, because that was key in, and also provide financing where it is required. We were also able to focus on, let's strengthen our monitoring and evaluation. This goes to Waziri. We are working on your goodwill, please legalize. We are working on your goodwill, hatujui ukiondoka, what will happen? And we were told by Dr. Romano, let's go through Parliament. You heard that? Yes. So that everything we have, the JASCOMs, everything, let us operationalize them according to the law. Let us also enhance our models in terms of, in our planning. What are we doing? How are we planning? And lastly, let us rationalize the 23 corporations in this sector that seem to be doing the same things with each other. Why not do all that? And did you hear that we are also taxing on agricultural inputs and also equipment? Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. God bless you so much.
Asante sana, Your Excellency, for taking us through that very interesting session, and also the panelists. Let's give him another hand. We are going to the last session, which is now the policy dialogue. That's another very interesting one. We are having our two PSs here, PS Agriculture and PS Livestock. They will take us through the presentations. In fact, PS Crops will be taking us also through the sensitization on the 4K clubs. And I think policy is so important because there is a philosopher who said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will lead you there. It has been agreed here that we exactly know where you're coming from and where we are going, but unless we anchor everything in sound policy, we may not achieve much. And I also like the issue of the moving target. Dr. Romano Kiome, that's a new one. We need to learn how to tame this target so that it's no longer moving, so that we can shoot straight and maybe achieve. There is an issue which was raised by AGRA on the M&E, and the two co-chairs, I want to report that the SWAG on monitoring and evaluation already has an advanced draft on M&E, which has 54 indicators. They had a SWAG meeting last week, and it's at an advanced stage, and very soon it will be ready for use with 51 indicators which were agreed upon. So at this juncture, I want to invite the PS Agriculture, after which I'll not come back here. This session was supposed to have been chaired by His Excellency the Governor, Nandi County, who is not here. But my colleague from Nandi will be taking over as soon as the PS leaves the floor. You take over so that you usher the next speakers and take us through the plenary after that. Thank you. Sanitizer.
Yeah, thank you very much, colleagues, and the CS and the governors present, CAS and Harry. I think most of the issues have been prosecuted very well in the various sessions, and so we risk actually repeating ourselves. Is there something for moving this thing? Or who is moving the slides? Okay, so just move the slides. So I'll just say a few things to add to the conversations that we've had. And I think we have heard a lot about CADEP, because those are the continental objectives that we have set for ourselves and that everybody tries to align to, because every 2 years we measure ourselves. And for all the years, we have struggled with the issues of data, because most of these targets that have been set under the CADEP process require data. And right now we are going through that process. And for some areas, we still struggle with getting the data. And the data collection process involves a lot of stakeholders, including the KNBS, including our own data units, including the counties, including the private sector. So I think the conversation about strengthening our data system is very important. Not only will it provide us with information to make it work for us, but also for the biannual review process. So that's one goal which we've been trying to meet. The other big goal is the one of 100% food nutrition security, which was set by His Excellency the President, where the focus was to increase agricultural output and value add, and increase small-scale farmer incomes, and increase resilience. I think these goals are still valid even as we debate all the challenges that we have been debating tonight. So based on this, we just are in the tail end of the agriculture policy, which captures the aspiration of CADEP and captures the aspirations of the Big Four agenda. The agriculture policy was developed in consultation with the counties in a very consultative process and concluded and passed in cabinet, and now it's allocated a sessional paper number, and it's in Parliament for deliberation and conclusion. So this will lay the framework, and it addresses most of the issues that we have been debating since morning. Most of the areas that have been identified were identified in the policy development process and solutions prescribed. So I hope even as we grapple with thinking about new solutions, let's go back. Probably the solution is already in the policy, and the challenge could just be implementation. The other issue is, of course, no, let's move to the next one. Go to the next slide, please. I won't talk about this one. Yeah. After the policy, of course, we have the STGS, which we have been referring to since morning. Basically, the STGS is a very comprehensive document, very comprehensive. When I look at the presentations that were handed over to us by the consultants, after a long process which started way back in 2015, all the data we needed to prescribe new solutions, and it's for the next 10 years. So if we are not careful, we will go and make another strategy. And yet we have a strategy which is like 2 years old because it was launched in 2019, then COVID happened. And so most of the things that we aspired have not been implemented. So for example, working with smallholder farmer to support them through SMEs and the e-voucher program. This is barely out of the blocks. So we have barely implemented this. In fact, like the e-voucher program is still on pilot basis. So we can't even say whether it's working or not. We are in the process of implementing it. And then the issue of creating agro-processing hubs and the commercialization of our large-scale farms through publicly owned land like ADC land being handed over to private. We haven't moved on this one, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult. We have developed a leasing framework, but it's very complicated because even the farms like ADC and the other public entities that have land, they are not really willing to let go of this, and that is the difficulty. So if we have to grow our production and the land is not available or is not being made available, how are we going to grow production? We are not going to grow production on the basis of smallholder farming. So if we really want to increase agricultural output, let's make land available. And counties have a challenge of making land available because of the political nature of land. So how do we get around the politics? Because if we have to get big investors, you have to give them 10,000 acres, 20,000 acres, 30,000 acres, so that there's potential for mechanization. Otherwise, then we have the opposite of subdivision. The moment there's conversation about land, squatters invade, all of a sudden, a potentially piece of land that could help in production is reduced into a as squatter problem, as happened in many parts of the country. So probably, especially if we have to address the issue of the depressing data on production, the solution is here, but it's not an easy one. The legal framework for that and the leasing framework is before cabinet. But I'm sure that is not the end, because it has to pass the political beat. And the governors have to be willing to support this, because most of the public land is in some county, and therein lies the challenge. I remember there was a company that wanted to invest in ADC lands in Trans Nzoia, and we just gave up because it became so complicated. It became so complicated. So part of the solution probably lies in figuring out how to make it easy for people who want to farm, and create the environment for them to farm. Otherwise, like that gentleman, I remember CS, we brought him to your office, and ADC took us round all over town in circles. And so in the end, they went back. So investors bringing them in is not easy because of just the ecosystem. And then, of course, the issues of resilience. We have programs on climate smart agriculture, targeting the smallholder, and some of the reforms that we have been doing, including the major shifts that we have seen with the warehouse receipting system. But it's a sophisticated system. And people are more comfortable with NCPB, storing maize, and we have to sustain these reforms. The risk of going backwards is very real, because not everybody understands this thing. So I think we have to do a lot of work on climate smart agriculture, but also on some of the reforms in the SFR sector. But I think we have a good strategy that has mapped most of the issues that were being discussed. I think at the national level with the ATO, the challenge will be what will happen with the ATO in transition. Will it remain? How do we anchor it? How do we make sure that it's sustained? And how do we make sure that everybody keeps on tracks with this very strategy document? And then at the county level, we had always talked about cascading this to the county level, focusing on specific value chains, but implementing the same principles of the SDGs. I'm not sure whether it's a conversation or the SDGs at each county level. Mary will tell us. Because if it's a conversation, then the solutions are prescribed here, and they are in quite detail. And probably what needs to happen is now to have like SDGs for each county, so that there is a clear focus on the priorities within the counties. Next slide. Yeah, so I think because our business is the smallholder farmer, I know Dr. Romano Kiome and Dr. Nyoro are familiar with this scheme, which represents the way the smallholder farmer or food systems around smallholder farmers should be organized. And all our policies are supposed to target the input side, the farmer organization, governance, management, capacity building at the middle, and the market side. And all our policies and the organizations that we have formed in the ministries are designed to respond to this diagram. And so, even though they look like satellites that are not interconnected, they are interconnected to this, because either they facilitate the farmer on the input side, or they facilitate the farmer on the farmer organization, governance, management side, or they facilitate the farmer on the offtake market side. So even as we were discussing the issues, what we can do as a government is to ask ourselves, at which place here is the place best placed for the government to intervene to address the issues that we have been discussing with. And at which space do we facilitate the private sector, make it easier for the private sector to intervene so that we don't get lost in the woods and in the frustrations because we see the numbers going down. I think our biggest problem is at the center there because the fertilizer is there. Maybe it's expensive, but intervening there might be simpler than giving an illiterate farmer a bag of fertilizer and they don't know what to do. And this is the problem that Nyoro is dealing with through the VBA model. I was shocked because you go to Kiambu, you think this is a very educated county. And still people are being taught how to space the maize and how to choose the variety that is most suitable and how to place the fertilizer. And so the complexity of farming, and I think the nature of our smallholder farmer, it's not one category of farmer. There's a whole blend of farming communities with different capabilities and different geographical locations, growing different things. And I don't know how we can put in place or what we should put in place as a supporting mechanism to enable them to do their enterprise in an educated manner. And I agree with the lady who was seated here. She just pointed to one problem, that they don't have the knowledge about what they are doing. And I think basically if we can only internalize this and the actors, especially in the counties and at other levels, then everybody picks their part. And I think most of the focus has been on the subsidy side, which is the input side, and that's part of the problem. Even the parastatals, the conversation about the parastatals need to take this structure into consideration so that it's not just a competition about mandate, it's about who is best placed to take out that mandate. This year we've had a very serious conversation with the Ministry of Health about food safety policy. And this conversation is as old as 2008. And every time people have disagreed. But this year we have persuaded the Ministry of Health that food safety is a function of the Ministry of Agriculture. And they actually eventually accepted because just showing the components of food safety and engaging in study visits realized that for us to have a good food safety system, the Ministry of Agriculture has to be at the heart of it. So I think when we look at the functions and what an organization is seeking to do, it will enable us really to place a mandate where it's most suited. Because the idea is not to compete, the idea is to facilitate the farm. So we've been doing this, move to the next slide. Basically carrying out a lot of reform on the back of the 2010 Constitution, but because we've been debating among ourselves and we found the debate going on, and we have created a good environment for us to really agree on most of these issues, we have made progress. But the process is very long because of the need to consult everybody. So these are some of the policies that we have worked with together through the sector working group for policy in the JASCOM, and I appreciate the support of our colleagues in the Council of Governors and also the CEC caucus, and also the CS's office for facilitating. So there are a lot of documents, that most of them are done, and I'm not going to go through them, but basically they are designed to facilitate the smallholder farmer and other value chain actors in the agriculture sector. So just flip through so that people can see the policies, including mechanization, some of the coffee. This is the food safety policy that I was talking about. A key one is the one on agriculture and research systems policy, because we need to build on that. I think the earlier one was done by Romano when he was still there. Next slide. Of course, extension is something that is major. It's in the works, and probably it will embrace some of the ideas that come from Kiambu County and Agra on the use of the VBA model. Seed policy, seed is very important. So all these are under development, and we are developing them together in consultation because of the complexity of the issues in each of those policies. Next slide. Yeah, warehouse is already out there, it's being implemented. What is needed is probably stronger funding just to make sure that it takes off, and for trade to finish with the COMEX issues. And the plant protection bill is in cabinet, is with the AG actually being scrutinized, as well as the mechanization bill. So all of these, you've seen them as we have worked. But if you look at the diagram, all of these are answering to one part of the diagram. Next slide. Yeah, NCPB reforms, they're underway. We are maybe at 50%, so we still have some work to do. And of course, coffee bill and sugar bill are still in Parliament. Next slide. Yeah. Of course, alongside that, we've been developing regulations. Our role is to create a better environment. Of course, the private sector has been complaining that there is over-regulation, but there are many issues around agriculture. And agriculture, especially where food is concerned, some regulation is necessary because of all the challenges that could come with issues of food safety, as well as food security. So since we are developing this together, I think the spirit should be to make it in such a way that people don't feel constrained in their businesses. Next slide. Yeah, of course, we have the challenge that the average age of the farmer is 60 years old or thereabout, and we have to get young people into agriculture. And we had the 4K Club, which is in schools, but we also, in the ministry, were keen to bring in youth into agriculture. So we have had a conversation about youth in agribusiness, and this means developing a strategy or policy to bring youth. We had a youth in agriculture business, but I think we now need to review it and expand it and establish a youth unit in the ministry, and probably the counties can think about the same. Because if you look at the demography of your farmers, it can be depressing, because that means we'll have a generation of people who don't know how to farm. And so because it could be happening at the county and the national level and in schools involving different ministries, so we have a coordination mechanism that is being proposed. And of course, we have rebranded the 4K Club with the involvement of His Excellency the President. We relaunched. Next slide. And the purpose of that was basically to reposition, so that we can generate interest among the youth in schools and excite stakeholders to support this idea that we need to bring young people more into agriculture, because agriculture is still a very big business in spite of everything, and it's something that the youth can embrace if we provide the right incentives and the right ecosystem. Next slide. Yeah, just go to the next one. Yeah, this is at the time when His Excellency was launching at the Nairobi show, ASK show. Next slide. Yeah, I think, so that I can conclude, probably the issue of funding has been discussed a lot. And there's a study by the World Bank on the public sector funding. What should it fund? And the conclusion, and this study was for Kenya, and I can share it. Basically, the focus should be on generating knowledge, so R&D, and disseminating knowledge and building human capital, so extension training and transformation and information services. And then reducing transaction costs, so public goods that support the agricultural sector, and either irrigation or facilitating access to markets through roads, of course, rural access roads, and then attracting private capital into the agriculture sector. And then, of course, for us, because most people are poor and we can't create enough jobs, addressing the issue of inequality and poverty. So these are very clear documents that we need to look at as we think about the budgeting process. And one of the observations in that report is that our budgets, the MTP, the Vision 2030, they are not aligned. And it is very difficult to align them. It's like one is ahead, another one is trying to get into. And so if we can be able to align and invest in the right investments, I think we'll get around the issues of productivity. Some of the issues of productivity is about genetics. If you are using the wrong genetics, of course, you'll struggle and you'll not be competitive. One of the debates we've had with ourselves just recently about animal feed. You have genetically modified maize here, which is cheaper, and you have your conventional maize here, which is expensive. And you have your farmers who are struggling to access, animal feed, affordable animal feed, so that they can be competitive in the market. And the choices are very clear if you are making economic choices. But because of the political economy of genetically modified crops, then you find we hesitate to make the decision for farmers. Even when the farmers themselves and the animal feed millers are demanding for these technologies. So sometimes we have to make some of these political decisions to embrace some of these technologies because they help us. And they help the farmer to be competitive. The only way is to help the farmer to be competitive is to enable them to keep pace with technology, because the other farmers are keeping pace with technology. Next slide. Yeah. So we advocate, of course, as part of the reform, but also as part of the conversation, to shift to SMEs and large-scale farms. SME, that means 30 acre, 40 acre, 50 acre. Half an acre, we have to find a way to consolidate these units for them to be viable. Of course, the increase in genetics, let's access genetics. Every large-scale farmer I've visited says, we want to access good genetics. We want to access good chemistry for us to be competitive. The parameters are known. The parameters are known, and the good farmers know what they want. Let's work with them to give it to them, and let's not put them in a straitjacket. Of course, because of climate transition to farmer-led irrigation, including household water pumps. In Yatta, Bishop Masika has shown that you can do this even with very basic inputs and with not a lot of money. But they are farming every month for 12 months, and they have addressed the issue of food security and income also. And of course, AFC, Commodity Fund, is what we have for farmers from the public sector side. But it's not working, I think. It's not working. So we need to look at that, because financing is one area. So if there's any policy area that we need to look at is, how do we finance agriculture without the government itself injecting itself there? And of course, the reforms in NCPB and the subsidy program, this is ongoing. And I hope with the transition, we will not go back, because it's not advisable and it's no good. And of course, the issues of animal feeds we have talked about. Otherwise, I think if the ministry can shift because of devolution, because of the fact that we have a 2010 constitution that has made the ministry like a policy place. And we sort of changed the way we run the program and push some of these mandates where they belong. Because when you look at that diagram, there is policy formulation, there is research, there is development, there is marketing. These are some of the areas when you look at enabling the business of agriculture. There is policy, regulation, development, research, and marketing. And if we are able to define the roles properly, then we can shift some of the thinking in the ministry and in the counties to support the vibrant agriculture sector. Otherwise, what we have right now in the system, we have crops officer, we have people who are dealing with potatoes, and probably someone who's dealing with nuts, but that is a carryover from the past. So even the reform process within the ministries, the growth process within the counties, within its structures, I think we still need to figure out how to do that well, institutional building, so that whatever ideas we have, we can create a good platform for implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. I'll request that probably you remain there, and the other speakers, as they speak, they'll also remain, so that we have a Q&A session after that. So I think next we are going to invite the PS in charge of livestock, Harry Kimutai. Thank you so much. I'll request us that we be patient, because I think our time is really running out, and I'm hoping that we can limit the remaining presentation, so that we focus more on really the Q&A session, so that we're able to really have an integrated session at the end of the day. So welcome, PS.
Thank you. Our Cabinet Secretary, Excellencies, governors present here, our Chief Administrative Secretary, CACs from the county, development partners present here. I'm just going to take you through what we do at the State Department for Livestock, and to see if that relates with the Constitution 2010, and whether it is not supporting the counties. It is good to look at it that way, because the issues that are coming out, and normally when we go to the counties, we face such kind of challenges. And it has come out here today that we need to reform, we need to change. We need to do things differently from what we used to do. And I think we've already seen some of those steps have been taken, and the collaboration between us and the county. And therefore, it's good also to look then at the State Department of Livestock to have that overview and its contribution to the sector. And somebody talked about seeing the contribution to the GDP. Is what you're contributing to the GDP, funding then should support that contribution, so that you take it to the next level. So basically, the livestock sector is a major driver of the Kenyan economy, and we've said this over and over again, that it contributes about 12% of our gross domestic product. And see the contribution in terms of gross development product in agriculture. It is a sector that if more funding is directed towards it, then it's going to bring a lot of transformation in our country. Again, if you look at our country, we say 80 to 83% of our country is in arid and semi-arid. And therefore, this is the area that we have talked about. So people are saying, are some areas which are dry? But what is suitable in such areas? Is it crops? Is it livestock? It is obvious it is livestock. Therefore, we need to strengthen support to those areas, because 83% of our land mass having the resource of livestock, then we need to invest in that area. Now, we play a big role under the Big Four agenda in terms of food security, food and nutritional security, which is really critical and is one of the Big Four agenda of His Excellency. But see what again we do, what we support in terms of the manufacturing pillar. If we harvest our animal resources well, then our manufacturing pillar is contribution to the GDP is going to grow. One of those areas is basically, and if you look at it, and today we have our CEO for Kenya Development Council, the leather, the hides and skins that we are losing, if we are able to tap into that, then actually we are going to bring transformation in the manufacturing sector. So we also support to achieve sustainable growth and development, and to ensure that we deliver in our mandate in these programs that we do implement. Next slide, please. All right. Now, I think we want to look at our mandate. Maybe this could also be another problem, so that we realign ourselves. Basically, our mandate is derived from the Executive Order number 1 of 2012. And what does it say? To promote, regulate, facilitate livestock production for socio-economic development and industrialization. So we've got an additional role to support industrialization through, I would have said, hides and skills, which will play a key role. And next slide. Now, somebody talked about resources following functions. These are our functions, all right? Looking at the livestock policy management, development of the livestock industry and marketing, which is my colleague professor has talked about in terms of our role in marketing, because when we support farmers, are we also supporting them in marketing? So we also need to look at that. We talked today about the issue of diseases, our veterinary services. What's our role there as a State Department in veterinary services and support to the counties for disease control? Are we playing that role? Are we supporting the counties? Because our role is to do capacity building to the counties so that we develop these programs. So it is really important that we align ourselves properly on that. Area of range development, that is the 83% of our land mass, and therefore we need to come up with the programs that are going to support issues of sustaining of our environment, our ecosystem in those areas. We deal with the livestock research and development, the animal genetic and conservation and research, which Professor Hamadi Boga talked about in terms of what genetics of animals do we have. Are we producing those genetics that will support the farmers, increase their productivity? Promotion of our dairy industry, because it's one sector that we've seen its contribution to the economy, and therefore, are we doing the right thing? And this, we've had the discussions when we were reviewing our dairy regulations, for example. We had engagements with the counties. It was very sticky issues that were, sticky issues were coming out. And some are even saying, dairy board, which you have talked that we have 23 parastatols within the ministry. And they're saying this dairy board, for example, needs to be disbanded and let it go to the counties. But will it be okay if we do that? Because these are some of the issues that we are talking about, that we need to look at how do we promote our dairy industry? What are the counties doing and what is the national government doing? But you will see this again when in another slide, what we are doing at the national level, so that you can see if it is supporting the counties in terms of dairy industry. A new issue that has come up in the livestock insurance program, which now has been merged with the crop insurance, and we have developed a bill that supports both the livestock and the crops. Another emerging area is beekeeping, which is very important. If we actually call it the low-hanging fruits, that if we can venture into it, then we will be able to grow our economy and support our farmers to diversify because of issues like climate change. I talked about, the leather sector development and promotion, which our CEO is here, is really key sector that is going to promote the industry and manufacturing pillar. Now, just to take you through in some of the State Department, the projects that we are undertaking in the State Department, the Kenya Livestock Insurance Program is one of the programs that we've implemented successfully, and now it has been, the World Bank has taken it up, and now it is becoming a regional program that is going to cover the Horn of Africa because of the challenges that we are facing. So we implemented the livestock insurance program successfully, that is now becoming one area that is supporting climate change. Because we've been talking about the cyclic droughts. What are we doing? How are we planning? Now, we are using this modern technology to ensure that it is supporting the livestock sector. The livestock insurance program operates this way. It's a livestock index based, meaning that it uses the technology of the satellite to provide images, give early warnings to the pastoralists, the farmers. If the fodder is depleting, if it is decreasing, and then it triggers what we call a payout, where the farmer is paid to protect the animals, to buy additional animal feeds in form of feed supplements, so that they're able to sustain that drought period and they don't lose their livestock. Remember, our CS was talking about, can we be planning this drought? We know the periods now, I mean, the cycle now is frequent, but we can still plan. This program has been designed to support such kind of planning. Now there's the towards ending drought emergencies, because it's a new thing and we've picked a few of those counties that we now want to bring the issue of this drought that is frequent. How do we tackle it? So we've partnered with the IUCN to develop this program that will be able to build those counties that are frequently facing drought. The new program that we've talked, because we've been talking about livestock at subsistence level, because everybody keeps livestock somewhere. Everybody has a cow, and what my colleague was saying is it viable? You have chicken, you're just rearing it is there, it's just a hobby. But we want to change our farmers now. We want to do what's called the livestock commercialization program. This program is designed in a way that we're looking at our function, the marketing part. We want to bring the farmer, target this farmer to produce, which is in line with our ASTGS program, where we now say these are the producers. And if they are produced within the value chains, who are the enablers that support us? The aggregators. Then from there, we take them to the processors. So we have kind of developed now programs that are geared to, as per our STGS strategy. And I think this is where we need now to shift our focus for the farmers, the smallholder farmers specifically, because we cannot get the million farmers that have maybe 500,000 acres. But these smallholder farmers, if we look at them in terms of in terms of economics of scale, they can produce more if they are really supported with the proper information, proper technologies that they can produce. And therefore, they can help us because we do not have land. Mark you, where we have arable land, it's not adequate for large-scale production. So subdivision of land is happening a lot. If you go to Kitale, for example, Maria will tell you there's no more mechanization. Where we used to have mechanization, we don't have mechanization anymore because the land has been subdivided completely. So this is another area that we need to look at. Next. These are just the project details. You can fast track that. Basically, you look at when you are designing these programs, we design them based on the counties, suitability of that county for that program. So we do not select, we do an assessment until we come up with how are those counties picked. Like for example, towards ending drought emergencies, we looked at Garissa, Tana River, Isiolo, Marsabit, Samburu, Kajiado, Kitui, Makueni, Tharaka Nithi, Meru, and Taita Taveta. So if you look at those, the design of our programs, they're designed in a manner that it suits those particular counties. Next. Well, these are some of the substantial programs that we talked about, which we derive them from our functions. I think we don't need to look at this. Let's look at the policies now that we have developed. Next. These are still the programs. These are still some of the programs. We're talking about the genetics, so we have supported ADC, for example, where our cabinet secretary opened the new semen center, and we want to see more farmers now using these genetics, because the investments that we have done, the government, the national government has done, which the county government cannot do. I'll give you one example where I had an engagement with a county, a governor from a county. They were requesting for liquid nitrogen plant. How can the ministry support or the department support the liquid nitrogen plant? And we said, I told him, Your Excellency Governor, you don't need a plant. We already have the liquid nitrogen plants in various areas. For example, we have one at Tahiti in Domba, we have at Nairobi, we have in Kitale. What is needed is a liquid nitrogen truck to transport this liquid nitrogen closer to your farmers. And also what is needed are the storage facilities. Do you have the storage facilities? You go buy the storage facility, and we partner with the Kagrik, and they will deliver to you the liquid nitrogen. And there you are, you will be supporting your farmers. But if you invest in the liquid nitrogen plant, then by the time you finish building the liquid nitrogen plant, the animals, somebody talked about the animals, they need to be serviced within the right time. So you'll miss the cycle of the animals because you'll not be getting the good genetics. So these are the areas that we focus on as a national government to look at this, how do we support the counties. So our policies, our programs are targeted towards that. Now, the policy regulatory framework reforms that we have undertaken, this is really key. If we don't come up with the proper policies, and that's why the engagement with the counties is critical, because we say that that is where the game is being played. If we develop them at a national level without taking into consideration what the counties are supposed to do, then we normally lose the game. So next. So I think in the last IGF meeting, it was agreed that the ministry fast-tracks some of these regulations, bills, strategies that we have developed so that it can be able to support the farmers. We have been able to undertake the following policies, instruments. One is a sessional paper number 3 of 2020 on livestock policy. And this, the objective is basically to provide sustainable development of the livestock sector. So you have got something that it's now anchoring the development and how the resources can be allocated. This has reached Parliament. It has already been cleared with Parliament, and therefore the count should be disseminated now to the counties. Similar to the veterinary policy, it is there to safeguard the animal health and welfare. This bill is this policy was very critical for us, because if you look at the animal welfare bills and other veterinary laws that we have, they have actually been overtaken because of the Constitution 2010. Now, this veterinary policy was critical, and it has now enabled us to move about 4 bills which are at the Attorney General's office. This is, of course, a joint combined with the State Department for Crops, the National Agricultural Insurance Policy, which was merged with the livestock insurance. So we did not want to separate. We said, let's merge it because it is targeting both, the farmer who is in crops and the farmer who is in livestock. The dairy industry strategy, beef strategy, and animal feed strategy, these are undergoing development because it is critical. We've dealt with the dairy regulations, but we now need a strategy that will take it to the next level. We need the beef industry. This is another area that we have not really exploited. Why? Because we do not have proper strategies that will guide our farmers. We say, in terms of the market, external market for beef, the nearest I always refer is the Middle East, the GCC countries. Other countries are able to service that market. For example, Australia, South Africa. And look at the distance of Australia and the GCC countries. In terms of transport, their cost will go up. But as it's only a 5-hour difference of flight, meaning it can reduce, our cost of freight will be less, and therefore that's a market that we need to really continue tapping. So our beef strategy is to, again, looking at that and see how we can support our pastoralists specifically to be able to access that market. Because there are certain things that must be done to meet the market. So we are trying to come up with that strategy so that the counties will be able now to look at the beef industry in a different way. Animal feed strategy. This is one area that we've lagged behind, I must acknowledge. I think we have now been given directives by His Excellency, and with the guidance of our Cabinet Secretary, we've talked of the short term, medium term, and the long term. We've come up with that framework. I think the first one, which is the short term, was done by gazetting, giving the animal feed manufacturers to import yellow maize duty-free. That means we've removed the taxes and any other levies that are payable on importation, so that it's like a subsidy program. But the one that is really important, and my colleague has emphasized on it, the animal feed manufacturers are saying, please allow us to access the GMO maize to be competitive, because other countries have done it. The most recent one, and Rwanda was also facing the challenge of animal feeds. For them, they have gone a step ahead. They have allowed the GM maize to be imported. Here, we have the National Biosafety Authority that is supposed to look at all issues related to GMOs. We have an act, we have regulations, but we are fearing to implement. We've talked with the scientists, they have taken us through. And this is where we expect the governors also to come on board and support, because my colleague here said the political. So we'll allow you to play that area, because we have already come up with their regulations. We've also recommended in our framework. So we expect now to take it to the next level, where we shall expect the governors to give us a lot of support. Next, please. Now, these are the bills that I'm talking about. They're already, the livestock bill, for example, it's been tabled at the National Assembly, awaiting stakeholder consultation at that particular level. Let people still give their views, because that's what our constitution said. Let it move at each and every stage. There must be stakeholder engagement. We did with the counties, we did the national validation. Now it has gone to the parliament. I think it is also going for that's called the public participation or consultation. We leave it there, so we're expecting that bill to move. Our only fear is, if it is not handled within this parliament, we might go back to start afresh. Again, that's another danger, where we've invested a lot of resources, and then we are taken back to start afresh. So that's another area that we need to take stock and see what is the role of maybe our National Assembly in supporting agriculture. We've had engagements, we've taken the Committee of Agriculture, we've had discussions with them, meetings, retreats, and we have really requested them to fast track some of these things, because that is their main mandate within the National Assembly. As I said about the veterinary policy, it has helped us to come up with the animal health bill. I think the bill is now that's going to help us improve the control of animal diseases. And therefore, we've had concurrence from the county government, and at the moment is at the AG's office for further processing to Parliament. Next, please. Still under the veterinary policy, it has helped us look at the veterinary public health bill, which is actually safety of our food of animal origin. Very critical bill, a bill that is going to transform and support the National Food Safety Bill that we are developing jointly with the Ministry of Health. So this bill also is going to play a very critical role in that. The other aspect, the other bill is the Animal Welfare and Protection Bill. Very critical because if we are to access the market, some markets are very stringent in terms of the animal welfare and the protection. So they do a review, they come and do an audit in some of these. And if you do not have this, such kind of laws or legislations, then it becomes difficult for us to access the market. So this one also is at the AG's office, so it's being processed for submission to the National Assembly. Next, please. This one's, I think, the dairy industry regulations is concluded. It was gazetted by our CS, and I think this is one that even when our CS joined the ministry, said, let us look at the old regulations, because he asked us how far have we gone. We are still far. We have not done stakeholder engagement. And said, can we look at the old regulations and see what can be done to support the livestock, the dairy industry, because the dairy industry was facing a lot of challenges. But now with this bill, and now this dairy regulations, actually it has given a lot of power now back to the counties. So if you follow and implement these regulations, then you don't have a problem again with the with our dairy board. So just follow these regulations, implement them, you will have your cess. It provides for you to collect your cess and to do, so that it's like almost a shared revenue. What now used to go to the dairy board has reverted back to the counties. Another very important regulations that we are developing is the livestock identification and traceability regulations. This one, we are doing the national validation, has been conducted, and we are waiting to engage with the committee, the parliamentary committee on delegated legislation, and subsequently allow our cabinet secretary to gazette. So we are actually at the critical stage. Next. Well, I want to talk about the livestock master plan. It's something that we have talked about, data, critical data for planning. At the State Department of Livestock, together with other development partners, we want to develop the livestock master plan. These master plans definitely will help us in digitizing the data that we shall have, and to know exactly what resources do we have in the livestock subsector. So it is really key for our planning. So we've started this, and we've requested development partners to support us, and the National Treasury has also funded us. I so believe that working closely with the counties, this is going to be the solution to the livestock sector. So we are going to engage the counties. We have already developed the National Steering Committee we have, and then we have the Technical Committee. So we are going to now start engaging the counties. Next. I think this is all about the livestock master plan. So it's basically, it's going to shift our focus and planning in the livestock sector, because it is the overall plan that we have. Next. Thank you. I think I have concluded. So any other question that you have, so that I'll be able to clarify.
Thank you. Maybe you just take a seat and then we'll take up the round of questions. Thank you so much. Let's clap for Harry. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm told because the rest of the speakers are not here, we want to appreciate the speakers for this evening session. I think I want also to appreciate you for being patient and allowing them to take us through really this crucial information about the sector. And I think crucially what we are focusing on actually is all about the policy. So I'm Kiplimo Lagat, I'm the CC member in charge of Agriculture and Cooperatives Nandi County. So I will probably allow us to have a QA brief session before we allow the CS to wrap it up for us. Okay. Thank you. So the CS has made a decision that we continue with the QA session tomorrow. So if it's okay, we go for tea and then we close it up. Thank you so much.